A young woman steps onto her bathroom scale. She holds her breath and squeezes her eyes shut, afraid to see the results as she listens to the dial spinning. When it slows to a stop, she opens her eyes and looks down. She balks at the result. 150 pounds! That's unacceptable in her eyes. She steps off the scale and examines her reflection in the full-length mirror. In truth, her weight is far from out of control, but when she looks at herself, she can't help but see flaws. The subtle ring of pudge around her middle, the way her butt sticks out just a little too far for her liking, the very faint thickness around her cheeks and chin that hint at her history of snacking. As she leaves the bathroom, she reflects on her situation. Of course she's gaining weight. How could it be any other way? For the last 2 years, she's been in lockdown during a pandemic, and she's barely left her apartment. She let her gym membership lapse, and instead of cycling to work, she's instead taking the easy way out by just driving. And it's not like she gets much exercise in her free time either. During these last 2 years of isolation, she's mostly stayed in and watched television. She's discovered a particular love for trashy daytime talk shows and court dramas. Intellectually, she knows that they're the equivalent of junk food, but at the same time, there is a certain mindless charm to them. She would be embarrassed to admit it to any of her friends, but she does enjoy just turning off her brain and absorbing some silly talk show about professional stunt dwarves or Satan-worshipping furry juggalos. That sort of entertainment has been a boon to get her through the tough times. Nevertheless, it's time to make a change. She promises herself that she's going to get into shape. Today, instead of vegging out on the couch, she's going to make an effort. She's going to go out and get some exercise, and she tells herself she's going to watch those extra pounds melt away right before her eyes. She hopes that her old gym clothes will still fit her. After all, she's definitely put on some extra weight since her last trip to the gym. After rummaging through her drawers, she finds what she's looking for: her spandex gym shorts and sports bra. She quickly changes her clothes and is relieved to see that, although they might be a little snugger than she would like, they still fit her pretty well. That's a good sign. She probably won't even have to work very hard to get herself down to her ideal weight. It's all a matter of willpower, she tells herself. I was fit before, so that means I should be able to do it again. All I have to do is avoid temptation. I'll just have to make sure I stay active instead of watching trash TV all day. After all, I don't want to rot my brain too much. On the first day, she actually does an admirable job of sticking to her plan. She cycles to work, enjoying the fresh air and the reassuring post-workout burn in her legs that let her know that she's making progress. She throws away all the junk food in her refrigerator and goes shopping for healthy fruits and vegetables. And, most important of all, she limits her television time. She knows that trashy TV is probably her biggest addiction, even more than junk food, so she needs to be careful of that. On the second day, though, she notices something strange. She starts off with a simple, healthy breakfast, just some granola and a glass of juice. It's barely enough to satisfy her, but she knows that she has to make sacrifices if she expects to actually lose any weight. After breakfast, she decides to go out for a jog. As she's out on the street, she's overcome with sudden hunger. Of course, that's to be expected. She's on a diet now, so it's going to take some time to adjust to these smaller meals. She puts her hand to her rumbling stomach and grimaces. She's never felt this hungry before. If she didn't know better, she would think that she hadn't eaten for a week with the amount of pain that she's feeling. In fact, she's actually starting to feel a little woozy, and she has to lean against a light post to keep from fainting. She shakes her head to clear her thoughts. Okay, she thinks, I must have misjudged how many calories I need to get me through a morning. Her eyes stray to a nearby coffee shop. She sighs in relief. She thinks to herself, I'll just pop in there and get myself a small snack, just a little something to keep my blood sugar up. She walks into the cafe and gets in line. As she waits, she can't help but stare at the rows of pastries on display under the glass. They all look delicious, and she is really hungry. She fully intends to only get a bagel with a little smear of cream cheese, but when she gets to the counter, she finds herself ordering way too much food. I'd like 2 scones, 3 danishes, and a bear claw, she says. Also a large super raspberry frappuccino with extra syrup and whipped cream. The words just tumble out of her mouth, almost as if it's not her saying them, but rather some other voice speaking through her mouth. What the? I didn't say that, she stammers. The clerk behind the counter eyes her strangely, and the young woman feels too embarrassed to protest further. She steps aside and waits for her order, pondering the strange event that just happened. Is she possessed? She's not a superstitious person, but she can't think of any other explanation for what just happened. She can admit to herself that she has broken down and lost to temptation over a tasty snack in the past, but this is ridiculous. Eventually, when the clerk hands her the order, she rationalizes the whole thing away. I must just be having a hunger hallucination, she says to herself. Obviously, I need to be a little more careful about not being so strict about my diet. I'm sure if I just eat sensibly, I won't have an experience like that again. Her stomach grumbles again, reminding her of the original reason why she stepped into this coffee shop. She retreats to a table in the corner and tears open the bag. She wolfs down her pastries with gusto and slurps at her rich, creamy drink. When she's finished, she sighs in satisfaction, although the uncomfortable, full feeling in her belly reminds her of her predicament. She only meant to eat enough to keep her from fainting, but instead, she's eating herself silly, and it's only day 2 of the diet. This does not bode well. Okay, she tells herself, this is my last cheat. From now on, I'm going to be serious about this diet. She stands up and leaves the cafe, ready to complete the rest of her jog. But then, something even stranger happens. On the television, the matriarch of the family is furious. She has forbidden her daughter from marrying the gardener because she believes that he is too low class for her high-born daughter. But what she doesn't realize is that her daughter is in love and that she is determined to make it work. The daughter and the gardener have eloped, and the matriarch is hiring a private detective to track them down. Meanwhile, the matriarch's long-lost twin brother, whom she thought died in a plane crash in the tropics, has actually been alive the entire time. He has been in a South American hospital recovering from amnesia, but now he returns to the family estate, ready to claim his share of the inheritance. These events are all noted by the family's shady lawyer, who has big plans to usurp the family fortune himself. Unbeknownst to the family, he is actually secretly working for their mortal enemies and business rivals to destroy them. The young woman laughs, shoving a handful of potato chips into her mouth. Oh man, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes now. That lawyer is playing them all like fiddles. Suddenly, she startles, as if she's just waking up. Where is she? Wasn't she just in that coffee shop? How is it that she's at home? And why is she eating potato chips? She was sure that she threw out all the junk food in the house. She must have bought a bag on her way back home from jogging, but she literally cannot remember it. And what is she doing now? Watching television and eating junk food? In disgust, she grabs the remote and shuts off the TV. She was supposed to be jogging, and instead, she's sitting at home and watching stupid soap operas. The thing that worries her the most is her apparent blackout. She remembers nothing about her trip home from the coffee shop, although the evidence of the potato chip bag indicates that she must have stopped at a convenience store or supermarket on the way home. How could she forget something like that? I really must be having a blood sugar issue, she tells herself reassuringly, even though deep down, she knows that can't be the case. She had the blackout after eating the pastries at the coffee shop, so that can't be the cause. But she really doesn't want to think about that, so she puts it out of her head with a renewed promise to commit to her exercise and fitness program. Over the next few days, she makes a valiant effort to keep her promise. She cycles when she can, she jogs when she remembers, and yet, the blackouts continue. And no matter where she is when she loses her memory, she always recovers in the same place. Back home on her couch, always in the middle of eating some fatty junk food, always staring at the television set. Sure, she's always had an unhealthy television habit, and she knows that trashy talk shows and silly soap operas are her biggest weakness. But it doesn't make any sense that she would be seeking them out when she's in some kind of fugue state, right? As the weeks roll by, the young woman finds that her weight keeps rising. When she steps onto the bathroom scale, she's shocked to see that the dial points to 200 pounds. She's doing everything right, she thinks. How is that possible? How is it possible that she's ballooned up an extra 50 pounds since deciding to slim down? She can't fit into her old gym clothes anymore. She can barely tug the spandex shorts up to her thighs, and even if she could, she's afraid that they're going to split apart. In desperation, she switches to an old stretchy sweatsuit. It's the only thing that she owns that still fits her. This is just a temporary setback, she tells herself as she stares at her bloated reflection in the bathroom mirror. I just have to work harder. And she does. Or does she? When she goes to ride her bike, she finds that it's no longer strong enough to support her weight. She can't perch on the seat comfortably, and the steel body frame starts to creak when she rests her full weight upon it. She steels her resolve. Sure, it might be embarrassing to go out in public wearing an ill-fitting sweatsuit and riding a bike groaning under her bulk, but she really has no choice. This time, she's going to do it. And she probably did ride her bike to work, right? She's not sure. The next thing that she knows, she's back at home, spread across the couch, basking in the comforting glow of the television. The floor is covered in empty bags and cartons, and her face is slathered with crumbs and sauce. The last thing that she remembers is that she was just about to go for a bike ride, but now she's back at home, and it looks like she just completely ruined her diet. She lifts her arm with some effort and stares at her watch. She's lost almost a whole day. That's the longest blackout yet. She must have gone out cycling and made her way home, where she decided to reward herself for her strenuous efforts with a little snack. That's the only logical explanation. She tries to reassure herself that maybe she's past the worst of it, but she finds that these mysterious blackouts keep happening. They happen while she's at work, while she's at the gym, while she's out cycling, but she always comes to in the same place, sitting on her sofa at home, in front of the TV, surrounded by the debris of a massive meal. Again, she wonders if maybe she's having some sort of reaction to her new low-calorie diet. Maybe she's been cutting back so far on her food intake that she's starting to have fainting spells. Maybe her diet food is tainted in some way. But that doesn't explain why she keeps gaining weight. The scale in her bathroom doesn't lie. It keeps reporting higher and higher numbers, and as much as she tries to reassure herself that it must just be broken, her ever-tightening clothes and ever-widening reflection tell her otherwise. Her trips to the gym become less and less frequent, as she finds that other patrons have started to stare and whisper about her. Are they laughing at her for not being able to control her weight? Are they whispering about how her new flab is spilling from the confines of her sweatsuit? She can't even run on the treadmill for more than a few minutes without being completely winded, and she's too wide to balance on her bike now. The young woman has grown absolutely massive, to the point that she completely fills the whole couch. She chews her way through yet another bag of potato chips, her eyes never straying from the ever-chattering television set. She barely moves from the spot, her tremendous girth sinking into a permanent groove in the cushions as the couch springs groan. She barely notices, however, because she's much too intent on enjoying herself. She loves to eat, and every bite brings her untold joy, her taste buds tingling with delight. She is constantly full, so much so that she feels slightly sick, so bloated that she feels like she might just burst, but she's powerless to resist the siren call of junk food. She scarfs down entire boxes of cookies and cartons of ice cream without a thought, having turned into the very definition of a mindless eater. Only occasionally does she rouse herself from this stupor of gorging, to reach for her telephone, to order more takeout or more grocery delivery, always choosing the most calorie-laden options. Other than eating, her attention is completely devoted to her television set. She watches a constant stream of daytime talk shows, laughing along with the studio audience as the hosts parade out an assortment of society's biggest freaks. Sometimes she'll switch the channel to watch soap operas, becoming so wrapped up in the ridiculous plot twists and melodramatic acting that she completely forgets the passage of time. Her bicycle stands propped against the wall in the hallway, completely forgotten and untouched now for months. At this point, all thoughts of losing weight have utterly evaporated, and all that she cares about is satisfying her appetites for junk food and junk television. One day, she suddenly shakes her head and looks down at herself in horror, as if seeing herself for the first time. "What the?" she says in disbelief. She drops her half-eaten carton of ice cream and grabs at her fleshy middle with her hands, as if to make sure that it's all her and not some kind of crazy dream. Her hands sink deep into her new flesh, and she realizes to her shock that indeed she has eaten herself into morbid obesity. "How is this possible? I can't be this big. I was only... Her words trail off as the sound of an organ sting from the soap opera on TV diverts her attention. Within seconds, her eyes have glazed over, and her hands move to pick up the dropped carton of ice cream. Her worries about her growing size forgotten, she's now only concerned with watching until the next commercial break. It might has gradually exerted increasing control over the mind and actions of its host, to the point that SCP-2611 is only fully conscious for 1 to 2 hours daily. The rest of the time, SCP-2611-1 is fully in control of its host's behavior. Prior to coming to the SCP facility, SCP-2611-1 influenced its host to consume massive amounts of calories, leading to the mysterious and sudden weight gain that we observed earlier. This was possibly an attempt by SCP-2611-1 to increase its own size and influence, but as of yet, its reasons, as well as how it exerts control over its host, are unknown. When in control, SCP-2611-1 can speak through its host, communicating in standard American English. SCP-2611's access to food has been limited since her arrival at the Foundation, so as to prevent her weight gain from accelerating to dangerous levels. Other than eating, SCP-2611-1's main interest appears to be daytime television. Attempts to communicate with SCP-2611-1 have so far met with little success due to the anomaly's limited attention span for anything other than the minutiae of daytime television. In a conversation with one researcher, however, SCP-2611-1 let slip that it preferred daytime television to the programming watched by, quote, "that other guy," suggesting that it lived inside a different host before it eventually took up residence within the body of SCP-2611. At another point, while in the middle of a conversation about a court drama, SCP-2611-1 suddenly announced, kill it now, I don't care if I die." Staff believe that this might not have been SCP-2611-1 at all, but rather the voice of SCP-2611 trying to break through the hypnotic control of her parasite to call for help. At this time, no drastic action is recommended until further observations can be made. SCP-2611-1 does not appear to be contagious, and the way that it bonds with the host is unknown, so it is currently classified as safe. At the moment, SCP-2611-1 is the only known instance of its kind. However, considering rising levels of obesity worldwide, it is not unfathomable to think that there could be countless other instances influencing the behavior of other hosts to dedicate their lives to consuming food and television. Who knows? It's not like most of us would need that much convincing. Seeing that shadowy figure coming towards him makes the worker turn and run. He hasn't had the time nor the luxury of freezing on the spot, or waiting for it to get closer so he could get a clearer view. He just runs. With every pace, every hurried, horrified step, comes the mental image of the strange figure gaining on him. In his head, every movement he catches in the corner of his eye, every shuffling sound he detects, the thing was right behind him, inches away and ready to strike. So he just keeps on running. Only seconds ago, it was just standing under a streetlight, a ways ahead of the worker, barely moving. He calls out to it, assuming it's a person, somebody may be lost or in need of help. But then, it steps into the light, and it's not a person at all. The head of the suit isn't on properly. It droops at an angle, like it hasn't been affixed, or is barely hanging on. The crude, lazy-eyed face is haphazardly drooping. That too isn't on right, as the entire head sways unnervingly with each approaching step. Maybe underneath the suit, hiding beneath all that dirty orange fur, still coated in grime despite the rain. Perhaps there's a person in there, whose arm hefts an old baseball bat as they plod closer and closer to the worker. But all he sees is the monster. The filthy costume might be clumsily made, but the worker instantly recognizes the all-too-familiar resemblance of an orange cat from a popular comic strip. It's what starts him running. That, and the blunt weapon the monster is holding, as it menacingly makes its way closer. The downpour doesn't let up as the worker turns a corner, met with the sights of two bright, blinding white beams of light cutting through the rain. A car, speeding its way down the road. It catches the worker in its headlights, and he starts frantically waving his arms, encased in the sodden fabric of his jacket. "Help! Oh, please! Please help me!" he yells. "Something's coming after me! I think it's trying to kill me!" The driver doesn't stop, instead simply cruising past. The worker can just about see through the passenger side window, the vehicle's sole occupant giving him a strange look from inside the safety of his car. Almost as quickly as it appears, the car has driven off, its headlights already fading from view thanks to the rain. What the worker doesn't realize is that the driver's look of confusion wasn't directed at him, but at the thing following him. The creature gives a low, animalistic sound, which causes the worker to spin around. Now he sees it, right up close in all its foul, ginger glory. A tail dangles lazily from the lower portion of the suit, trailing in puddles laden with muck, the water making the fur even dirtier than it already is. It's so close that the awful, pungent stench of the thing hits the worker's nostrils, a sickening smell that somehow seems to fit with the grim, gross costume and its wearer. Seeing the wet, fur-coated suit so close, he realizes that it isn't covered in the soft, plush synthetic coat that he expects a costume like that to be made of. It looks real, like actual cat hair on a huge humanoid shape with the legs and arms of a man. Arms that were midway through swinging a baseball bat right at the worker's head. He ducks just in time, the dull wooden bat glancing off the bricks of a nearby building, narrowly missing the worker's head. As it bounces off the wall, the blunt weapon slips from the soggy gloves of the suit and clatters to the ground. The second he hears the wooden bat land on the ground, the worker turns his heel and runs again, taking advantage of those precious few seconds to get further distance between him and his attacker. It's only exactly as he turns his back that he wishes he'd reached for the bat himself to fight back. Rushing further down the rain-swept street, the worker can hear the heavy slumping footsteps of the suited attacker giving chase. He alternates between looking straight ahead, the raindrops streaming down his face and getting into his eyes, and daring to glance back over his shoulder. Every time he does, he's met again with the horrifying sight of the suit behind him. He wants nothing more than to escape, to get out of this nightmare wherein he is soaked head to toe in rainwater and fear, running for his life from someone dressed as the comic strip cat he sees every day. But as strong as his will to escape is, he can't bear to let the fur-suited pursuer out of his sight for even a second. If he can't see it, then it might be anywhere. At least looking told him that it was still right behind him, bearing down on the worker with its bat now firmly back in hand. The shrill noise of chain links rattling sounds behind him, as the attacker in the suit starts striking a nearby fence, making the worker more and more aware that with every strike, it's getting closer. Through the relentless downpour, the worker spots a shape standing on the sidewalk just a few feet ahead. Short, stationary, something he sees every day of his life but never pays any notice to. But tonight, it might just be the thing that saves his life. A trash can. It's full, and that means heavy, and any second now, he'll be close enough to reach it. A plan forms in seconds, erupting like a fire with gasoline thrown on it. If that gasoline was pure, terrified adrenaline of being chased by someone in an orange cat costume. Reaching out, as soon as his fingertips grip the wet metal rim of the can, the worker pulls as hard as possible, his instincts keeping him from stopping running. The trash can clatters behind him as he passes, followed by the heavy thud of the attacker falling to the ground as it trips over the obstacle and lands furry head first in the garbage now strewn over the sidewalk. The worker knows he's only got another short window, another blessing of a precious few seconds to get far enough away from his attacker. He turns, changing course to rush across the street. There's an old warehouse over there. If there are security guards working, they might be able to help. If not, and the place is unguarded, then at least it could be somewhere to hide. A sudden blaring noise pierces the worker's eardrums before he can make it all the way to the opposite sidewalk. It's a horn, coupled with a bright pair of lights appearing as if from nowhere. Then, before he can turn to see it coming, impact. First against the hood of the car, speeding through the rain towards him, unable to stop in enough time. Next, the pain of hitting the jagged blacktop of the road. The second impact, as the worker lands a few feet away, spots of rain still pattering against his face, as everything goes from dark to pitch black for a few seconds. His head floods with scenes from earlier that day, as if his life was about to start flashing before his eyes, only in reverse. The news of the comic strip doing poorly arrives at the Paws Inc. office, and with it, the knowledge that, if there are going to be layoffs, then he'll be first. He's the new hire after all. It didn't matter that the once beloved comic of a cartoon cat is losing its popularity, going stale after so many years in print. It upset the investors, and the worker has been worrying all day if he'd be the one fired to appease them, until he suddenly remembers what's coming after him. Fighting back and clawing his way back to consciousness, he struggles back to his feet, screaming with pain. He's injured, that much he can certainly tell, even if he doesn't know how badly. Hey, mister! The driver calls, stopping his car and starting to climb out of the vehicle. It's a different driver and car this time, and unlike the first, he makes the effort to stop, a mistake that is about to cost him greatly. He sees the worker getting back up, ignoring his calls. He raises his voice to cut through the noise of the pouring rain. Hey, you okay? I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. My lights were on low, wipers were going. It wasn't until you rushed out across the street that... Anyway, look, let me at least get you to a hospital. We can exchange our insurance information once they get you all patched up. The worker wasn't listening. He hears the driver's words but pays him no mind. He's still so intent on getting away that it takes him a second to realize. The car. It's a way out. And then, the worker makes the same mistake as the driver. He stops. And when he does, he sees what has clambered back to its fur-coated feet and is now shuffling towards the driver. Look out! The worker yells. The driver turns, just in time to see. What the hell? He exclaims. Wait a minute, why are you dressed in a Garfield costume? Whack! The sound of the bat being swung at the driver makes the worker feel sick. He turns his back and moves as quickly as he can towards the warehouse, despite the pain and the horrified screams coming from behind. Beneath the rain, there's something else, a twisted, vile squelching noise that quickly snuffs out the driver's dying cries. The worker doesn't dare to look back this time. He doesn't want to see what's happening. Lifting a heavy metal shutter and pulling it shut behind him, he finds himself in the warehouse. It's completely deserted. There isn't a single sign of life anywhere. The only sound is the pattering of rainwater against the hard concrete floor, dripping through a hole in the ceiling. Guided by the low, glowing light of the street lamps outside that bleeds through the warehouse windows, the worker starts fumbling around for a place to hide. Just as he crawls underneath a large pallet rack, he hears a metallic rattling as the fur-suited monstrosity lifts up the shutter. It's inside. With heavy, plodding steps in its suit, it paces up and down the aisles of discarded shelving. The worker clamps his soaked hands against his mouth, trying to mask his panicked breathing, only to let out a scream as he feels something grab his ankle and pull. With ease, the thing dressed as a disheveled Garfield pulls him out of his hiding place. Instinctively, the worker thrashes his legs, landing a solid kick to the creature. As his foot connects, he notices it doesn't feel like a person underneath the suit. There's no body, no familiar outline of a human being beneath all the soggy fur and stench. It's just a slimy mass. Nonetheless, the kick knocks the garish Garfield back, only a few paces, but better than nothing. He scrabbles to his feet, standing and running as fast as he can in the opposite direction, only to hit a wall at the far side of the warehouse. The shutter is the only way out, and right now it's wide open. But Garfield stands between the worker and freedom. He turns to dart down the next aisle, between the rows of shelves, keeping his eyes on the attacker as he passes underneath the hole in the ceiling. The rain is still coming down through it, leaving a puddle on the floor. The worker's focus is locked on the beast. He suddenly feels his foot slipping out from under him, that awful lurch of his heart as he falls. The puddle. He slipped on it and come crashing down to the ground. The force of the concrete striking his back knocks all the breath from his lungs. Everything is spinning in a nauseating mix of pain, disorientation, and terror. Above, through the unrepaired ceiling, drops of rain come pouring down on him. Then, a low, agonized meow from somewhere nearby. The monster, Garfield, brings its bat swinging down and sharply connecting with the worker lying on the ground. A new surge of pain racks his body, right at the hip where the baseball bat just landed in an unforgiving blow. The worker can do nothing but scream in pain and fear. A horrible sound, like something wet tearing, fills his ears over his own cries. He remembers the sickening feeling of a slimy mass being aggressively pushed into his face. It's disgusting, rancid, but even under all the horror and the repulsive taste, he can detect familiar hints. Pasta, beef, tomato sauce, cheese, all of it moldy and rotten, but still recognizable. The monstrous SCP-3166 forces further fistfuls of lasagna down the worker's throat until the screaming stops. He'd always hated Mondays. A wasp stings a cockroach in the brain, rendering it a mindless zombie that she can lead to her home and fill with eggs that will hatch and devour the insect from the inside. A snail accidentally eats the eggs of a flatworm, and the eggs hatch, filling the snail's eye stalks with sacs of wriggling larvae. They mimic the movements of caterpillars, attracting hapless birds and enticing them to swoop down, attack, eat, and continue the life cycle of the worms. The spores of the cordyceps fungus make their way inside of a doomed ant, taking over its nervous system, puppeteering its body, and forcing it to march to the nearest highest point, only to die and split open, fungus blooming from its corpse and spreading spores to the next victim. Underwater, the sea louse settles into its new home inside of the fish's mouth, feeding on blood from the tongue until it withers away. There, the louse attaches itself in the tongue's place, serving as a mimic of the original organ, while the fish is none the wiser. Back on land, humans are not exempt. Nematode worm larvae infect the bloodstream through fly bites, hiding undetected until their host feels them wriggling beneath the cornea. Guinea worms enter the system when a person drinks infested water, growing longer and longer, then forcing their way out through the foot. Nature is full of terrifying parasitic creatures, but far scarier than the parasites we know about are the parasites that we haven't discovered yet. The creatures sneaking in and burrowing under the skin of their hosts without anyone even knowing they exist. After all, if you don't know something is there, how can you possibly hope to protect yourself from it? As a man hikes through the woods of the Pacific Northwest, he's thinking about repelling mosquitoes and pulling up his socks to stop ticks from latching onto his flesh. But he has no idea what else is lurking out here in the wild with him. He knows to look out for mountain lions and bears, to watch for signs of rabid animals, and avoid being bitten or scratched. But he doesn't notice the tiny, almost invisible flecks drifting through the air around him. He doesn't notice when one happens to get caught on the breeze of his inhale, pulled into his nostril. He rubs at his nose idly, sniffing to clear his airways, then turns his attention to a bird nesting in a nearby tree. All the while, something is taking root right under his nose. Well, actually, inside of it. But he doesn't feel a thing other than the occasional urge to sneeze. He does, sneezing loud enough to startle the bird he was observing moments ago, but it doesn't do any good. Sneezes are for clearing out dust and debris, foreign objects that wind up in the nose by happenstance. This new intruder is there by design, and it is holding on tight. The hiker continues the rest of his walk without a care in the world, taking deep breaths of fresh forest air and relishing the feeling of the breeze on his face. By the time he gets back home, he's made it out of the woods without a single mosquito bite, with nary a tick to be found in his meticulous pre-shower check. That night, he sleeps soundly, and the next morning as he goes back to work at his office job, all thoughts of the wilderness slowly drift from his mind. He goes about his ordinary routine for months, all the while carrying a hidden passenger with him from place to place, a tiny little thing steadily growing larger and larger, spreading spindly appendages out and up, through the nasal passages, up toward the skull. One night, about 6 months after that fateful hike, the man is sleeping peacefully in his bed, dreaming of a sunlit forest clearing and the pleasant chirping of birds, when all of a sudden, he's jerked awake by a splitting pain in his head. His vision swims from the throbbing pain, and he clutches his face, pressing against his forehead. It must be a migraine, he thinks. He hasn't had one in quite some time, but this is clearly no ordinary headache. Eventually, the pain subsides, and he's able to drift back to sleep. But the next day, at the office, it returns. That same sharp pain radiating through his skull, like the worst sinus headache he has ever had. The persistent feeling of pain and pressure in his head becomes too much to bear, and he decides to take the rest of the day off of work and go to the doctor. Much to the man's relief, his doctor is not concerned. With no other troubling symptoms presenting themselves, the situation seems relatively straightforward. She writes a prescription for some migraine medication, then sends the man on his way. That night, when the headache returns, the man takes some of the medicine, and the cloud of pain clears. Sweet relief. Once again, things are good. For a couple months at least. But then, one day, on his morning walk to the office, just as he's lifting his travel mug of coffee to his lips, his vision cuts out. It's as if something is blocking his eyes, as if someone were covering them and preventing him from seeing directly ahead. But when he lifts his hand to feel his face, there's nothing there. Panicking at the sudden loss of sight, he drops his cup, spilling coffee all over the sidewalk. He doesn't even notice the spill, too busy grasping at his face and feeling his eyes with his fingers. He fumbles in his pocket for his phone, hoping he can remember where the numbers on the screen are well enough to call 911. But his hands are shaking so hard that he drops the phone, hearing it clatter on the pavement. He exclaims in frustration and fear, and turns around following the sound of the phone. And as he turns, his vision suddenly clears, the blinders lifted, and he's able to see just as well as he did before. Experimentally, he turns back to face his original direction, and again he loses his sight, something blocking his view. He turns around, and he can see again. He tries this a few more times, spinning back and forth, watching his vision flicker in and out. He only stops when a passing jogger shouts at him, asking what the hell he's doing. The interruption startles him, bringing him back to earth. What is happening? Surely this can't be normal. What is it about facing one direction that causes him to lose his sight, while another direction returns him to normal? A sinking feeling in his stomach tells him that whatever was causing his headaches before, it was not something he should ignore any longer. He grabs his phone off the ground, calls out of work, and schedules an urgent appointment with his doctor. At first, he considers running home and getting his car or his bicycle, but his unreliable vision would make taking either mode of transportation a potentially deadly mistake. So instead, he walks. The walk to the doctor's office is the most difficult walk of the man's life. Every time he turns a corner, he wonders if his vision will flicker out again, if the mysterious obstacle will block his sight and force him to reroute himself or start from scratch. While trying to maintain a consistent line of sight, he loses his balance several times and nearly collides with a lamppost. Eventually, he reaches the doctor's office. One look at the man's terrified face is enough for the doctor to insist on some immediate x-rays of his head. The man sits on the examination table, nervously bouncing his knee, waiting for the doctor to return with the results. What could it be? Some undiagnosed degenerative illness? A tumor? Irreparable damage caused by looking at a solar eclipse as a child? The man can hear the doctor speaking to a nurse in hushed, frightened tones just outside of the exam room door. He can't quite tell what she is saying, but he makes out one word that makes his blood run cold. Infestation. When the door opens and the doctor enters holding the man's chart, her expression is neutral and professional, but her face is pale, her forehead dotted with sweat. She can't hide the fact that whatever she saw on that x-ray, it horrified her. "What is it?" he asks, though he isn't sure he wants to hear the answer. The doctor is silent for a moment, turning over the right words to say in her mind. After a seemingly endless pause, she pulls an x-ray from the stack of papers on her clipboard and pins it up for them both to see. There the man can see his skull, a white outline against the dark background, his skeleton on display. But inside of the skull, there's a mass that definitely shouldn't be there. It starts in his nose, a rounded shape, but it stretches out in long limbs that travel up into his brain. After a long pause, the doctor speaks.
I've never seen anything quite like this before. At first, I thought it might be some sort of growth, but as I reviewed the scans, I realized that it showed signs of movement. Whatever's in there, I'm afraid that it's alive." The man's stomach turns, and he worries for a moment that he might be sick all over the clean white floor. Instead, he just asks the doctor what can be done to help him. She explains that she plans to give him a local anesthetic, then attempt to get a closer look at the situation. Once she has eyes on the parasite, she will see if she can surgically remove it without causing any additional damage to his brain tissue. All the man can think about is that thing inside of his skull and how badly he wants it gone, by any means necessary. He immediately agrees, and after a few quick injections, he's lying on his back, staring up at the ceiling, as the doctor performs a nasal endoscopy. She slides the tube up his nostril a little bit at a time, monitoring the image on a nearby screen. Suddenly, she freezes, a small gasp escaping her lips. He demands to know what she's seeing, and she stammers, saying only that it's a creature she's never seen before, but it looks quite a bit like a sea spider. The man's eyes widen, and he's about to say something else, but suddenly his vision goes dark again. Now he knows what that means, and the doctor's startled cry confirms it. The creature is moving. The man begins shaking, begging the doctor to get it out of him, to just grab the invader with some tweezers or whatever it is doctors do in this situation and get it out of his head. She grabs a pair of nasal forceps and slowly eases them into his nose, but the creature feels her coming and lurches upward away from her grasp. The man feels a sudden burst of pain, and then everything goes dark as he loses consciousness, his eyes fluttering shut. The doctor checks his pulse, checks his breathing, and attempts to rouse her patient, but he's out cold. As she examines him, she notices a fluttering motion beneath his right eyelid. At first, she thinks she imagines it and takes a closer look. The flutter turns into a distinct, undeniable bulge beneath the eyelid, and then a slender limb pokes out from beneath the thin veil of flesh. It curves under the eyelid, tugging it open to reveal the unfocused eyeball beneath, and something else. Something moving, pushing the eyeball aside just slightly without knocking it from the socket. The doctor watches in open-mouthed horror as more long, thin appendages join the first, poking out from behind the eye toward the air. The many-legged creature pulls itself from the ocular cavity and begins scuttling down her patient's face, over his neck, and off the edge of the exam table and onto the floor. As it nears the door, the doctor regains her ability to move and rushes to try and catch the thing. She grabs a jar and the forceps, hoping to capture it without touching it. Even with gloves on, she shudders at the thought of touching the thing. It evades her grasp, darting away from her forceps. It scrabbles back toward the table, and in a moment of primal instinct and revulsion, the doctor brings her foot up and stomps on the little parasite with all of her strength. When she lifts her shoe, all that's left on the ground is a few spindly legs and a small brown stain. She curses herself for acting impulsively and not finding a way to trap the thing and keep it for observation, but that ship has sailed. The only thing she can do now is tend to her patient and monitor his well-being. As she approaches the man on the table, his eyes open, and he gasps, sitting up suddenly and gripping his head. The man awakes with a headache and a foggy feeling in his head, but also with a sense of relief, a feeling that the unwelcome presence that took up residence in his skull for so many months is thankfully gone. He asks the doctor, haltingly, struggling to find his words, if she was able to remove the creature. She tells him, simply, that it is gone now. The man slowly climbs off of the table, and, ignoring the protest from the doctor as she begs him to sit back down and let her examine him, he walks out of the office and heads back home. Over the next several weeks, the man returns to normal life. He feels a little bit different, a little hazier, a little slower to respond. He tires more easily, going to bed earlier and sleeping in later, but overall, he feels nothing but relief. Still, at night, when he tries to fall asleep, he thinks of those X-rays. He imagines what that creature might have looked like when the doctor got it out, how it might have moved. He wonders where it came from, or if it will come back. He never goes hiking in those particular woods again. Meanwhile, the doctor receives an influx of patients complaining of persistent headaches. Sometimes it's a sinus infection, sometimes it's a hormone imbalance, sometimes it's stress. But a few times, well, she knows what to look for now. She tells her patients to watch out for changes in vision, for a feeling of pressure in their skull. She learns how to keep a straight face when looking at their X-rays and seeing that familiar long-limbed shape burrow deep in their nasal cavities. She puts her patients under now when she tries to remove the creatures. It doesn't make much of a difference, but it saves them the terror of the truth, saves them the feeling of the creature thrashing inside their head until it knocks them out. She manages to collect a few specimens for study and contacts her friend at the Centers for Disease Control. He's never seen or heard of anything like these parasites either, but he does know someone who might be able to offer their expertise. When the doctor comes into work the next day, there are two strangers waiting in her office. They introduce themselves as employees of a specialized research foundation and ask to see her samples. The next thing she knows, the doctor is waking up in bed the following morning, and she has no memory of ever seeing a patient with a strange spidery parasite in their skull. If she remembered enough to look for the records, she would find that they had disappeared from her office, along with the living specimens she had collected. But she doesn't remember, and her discovery is now in the hands of the SCP Foundation, who have given it an official designation, SCP-1104. SCP-1104, commonly nicknamed.
A number of historical documents related to the case have been discovered and made available to Foundation researchers that shed light on SCP-3998, including excerpts from a 17th century diary belonging to a woman who lived near where the cadaver was discovered. In the entries, the woman describes attending the wedding of her neighbors, Aidan and Candace Hayes, though Candace did not seem especially happy with the arrangement. Candace is characterized as someone who likes to keep to herself, and who does not conform to the era's idea of a good wife. As a result, it appears that she became the victim of abuse at the hand of her husband. The diarist hypothesizes that Candace has brought this fate upon herself due to her behavior, which may stem from her being under the hold of the devil. In other words, the neighbor believes that Candace is a witch. Others must have had the same suspicion, because we also have records of Candace's interview with a Judge William Stoughton, who questioned her about the accusations of consorting with evil spirits. Candace readily admitted to this, though she disagreed that it was in any way evil. She told the judge that the rituals and magics she practiced were not inherently good or bad, and that anyone was capable of using the same tools. She went on to explain that she hated her husband, that she had been forced to marry him, and that he had been nothing but cruel and violent towards her. Candace also mentioned a name, Clovis, that the judge assumed to be the demon that she had made her cursed pact with. Candace appeared to offer no defense or excuses for her actions, and the judge sentenced her to die by burning at the stake, with her husband, Aidan, being the one to light the fire. The story of this witch trial was typical of the time, and that likely would have been the end of what we know about SCP-3998. But another historical document was located that has truly given a new perspective to this anomaly. A sealed letter found in the cellar of a home that is addressed to Candace, though it appears to have been written after her death. The letter is from her secret lover, and describes how they collected Candace's burnt bones from the bottom of the hill before binding them together with wicker and wire. The letter then describes how Candace's husband has recently restocked his own home with gin, which is well known to be extremely flammable. The letter ends with an affirmation of the writer's eternal love for Candace and is signed, Clovis. But perhaps the best information we have about the origin of SCP-3998 comes from an obscure local tale that was passed down orally for years and eventually documented on an urban legend website. The legend tells of a woman who promised her soul to a she-devil who taught her magic, but also offered companionship. When her husband found out, he contacted the local authorities and had the woman arrested. She was tried, her legs were broken, and she was hung up like a scarecrow before being burned alive. Her body was dumped off the side of a mountain, but the she-devil collected her bones and gave her life again. The need for revenge burned in the woman's heart, so in the middle of the night, she doused herself in her husband's gin, set herself on fire once more, and fell upon him as he slept, burning him alive so he could suffer the way that she did. SCP-3998 is currently held in a secure holding locker in Site-34 that is fireproofed and vacuum sealed to prevent it from igniting. Every morning at 9 a.m., 3998 and its locker are cleaned to remove the secretions of flammable liquid. D-Class personnel who have been convicted of domestic abuse crimes are to always be kept at the site to ensure that they are the targets of SCP-3998, which, when it's not allowed to ignite, will result in them only feeling mild discomfort in their head and chest rather than spontaneous combustion. Due to its relatively easy method of containment, SCP-3998 has been classified as safe. However, recent developments have caused the Foundation to rethink this classification. Despite 3998 being securely contained, the number of arson-related homicides in the state of Massachusetts have actually increased following containment, with many showing the same damage to their body as would be expected in a victim of SCP-3998. And while it may be that these are the result of a yet uncaught serial killer who simply happens to employ similar methods of killing their victims, a recent re-examination of the SCP-3998 corpse has revealed more troubling details. The body of SCP-3998 does not belong to Candace Hayes, and in fact appears to be a male who was in his 30s at the time of his death. Following these new revelations, reclassification of SCP-3998 to Euclid is pending. Whether SCP-3998 is the body of Candace's husband Aiden, forced to endure an eternal punishment of burning again each and every night, or if it's some other unfortunate victim of a violent and painful death, is unknown, as is the ultimate fate of Candace and Clovis. But with the deaths that would appear to be attributable to SCP-3998 showing no signs of stopping despite containment, it can only be assumed that the Wicker Witch lives.
The walking dead, dripping and rotting, with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. A huge black wolf stalking through the woods as you walk home alone in the dead of night. Even the horrors of the SCP Foundation, the old man, SCP-106, the gray shrieking nightmare of SCP-096, and the relentless hatred and violence of SCP-682. All these things frighten people, even the staff of the SCP Foundation. But one question still haunts them. One terrible, awful question. What's in the attic? What's in the attic? What is in the attic? There's a certain time of night where it seems as if day will never come, where the shadows have stretched long and heavy across the floor, and the air is thick with a sense of shapeless dread. Past midnight, but far before the relief of dawn, it is the time of night when terrors come to life, where fear sits on your chest and refuses to let you breathe easily. Right now, it is that time of night in the Lee family home. And with a knife under her pillow and disaster on her mind, Olivia Lee cannot sleep. She holds her breath, listening to the sounds of the house around her. Her siblings were asleep in their respective rooms, snoring away in the kind of peaceful slumber she could barely remember. Her parents whispering together downstairs. She can't make it out exactly, but she has a theory. They're talking about her, most likely. What else could they be discussing? After so many years of seemingly endless fighting, shouting, slamming doors, a porcelain vase or expensive china plate smashed against a wall, she can feel the tension reaching a boiling point. No doubt her parents are plotting, discussing what to do about her. They could kick her out, but she's only 17. No, she has the sneaking suspicion they have something else planned, something more drastic. That's why she snatched one of the kitchen knives yesterday, just in case. She can feel it under her pillow now, its presence radiating through the cool pillowcase against her cheek. Things have never been quite right in this house, in this family. Since she was little, she could feel an aura of wrongness clinging to everyone, to everything. It's only gotten worse over the years, condensing into a fog that chokes her when she tries to act like everything is normal. Like they're a perfect, happy family. Her parents might be content to keep up the charade, but she won't. Not anymore. She's been preparing, packing a duffel bag of clothes, food, a little bit of money, everything she needs to get out of this house, out of this town, once and for all. If they try anything tonight, that will be the sign that she needs to cut and run. Olivia's thoughts are interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside of her room. 2 sets of adult footsteps, not her siblings coming to complain of a bad dream. Her parents. She holds her breath, waiting for the footsteps to pass. They stop just in front of her door. The knob begins to turn, and she curses herself for not locking it. This is it. Whatever force in this house has made them resent her all this time, it has driven them to act. As the door creaks open, Olivia snatches the knife out from under her pillow, brandishing it in front of her. Her parents look more angry than surprised, as if they were expecting this from her. They shout at her to put the knife down and listen to what they say. Olivia refuses. It's the only leverage she has in this 2-on-1 confrontation, and she isn't about to give it up. She snatches the bag out from under her bed, and she slowly backs her parents up against the wall. This close, she can see the desperation in her mother's eyes and smell the spirits on her father's breath. Her hand trembles, and her eyes fill with tears. Suddenly, there's a sound from above, something heavy, shifting and moving across the floor. The sound makes Olivia's blood run cold. Up there, that's the attic. There's nothing in the attic, or at least as far as she knows. She's never been up there, could never force herself to climb the ladder up into the darkness without every fiber of her being rejecting it, every primal instinct screaming at her to get away. For as long as she can remember, the attic has been a place she never wanted to go. There's the sound again, louder this time, more insistent. It turns her stomach, a chill running down her spine. Whatever's up there, she needs to get as far away from it, from this house, as possible. She drops the knife, letting it clatter to the floor, and she tears out of the room with her duffel bag. She can hear her parents behind her, calling her name, begging her to listen, threatening her if she doesn't, but she shuts out the noise. The only thing on her mind is getting out of this house. As she runs, she can hear that sound in the attic following her, somehow right above her, no matter what part of the house she's in. She doesn't even bother to put on her shoes, flinging open the front door and sprinting out into the night in her socks. The door slams behind her, and suddenly, Olivia is gone, disappearing into an open world where she can breathe again. Back inside the house, the family she left behind is still taking in the reality of her absence. Above them, in the attic, something shifts. After Olivia leaves, the mood in the house begins to shift as well. Her parents, Franklin and Yvette, had hoped that her absence would make their home seem lighter, but in fact, it's been the opposite. They used to be able to ignore the attic, to glance at it and feel the gnawing sensation that something important, something terrible, was waiting up there, then keep walking and move on with the rest of their day. But now, without their eldest daughter, the thorn in their side who constantly aggravated and disappointed them, the feeling is getting harder to ignore. Slowly but surely, thoughts of the attic worm their way under the couple's skin until there's little else that they can think about. The house has taken on an eerie silence. It doesn't sound like this in a house where a family of 5, formerly 6, but now 5, live. It sounds like a grave. Franklin cracks first, gives way to the pressure to climb the ladder and see what's up there in the attic. One morning he wakes up, drinks his coffee, then summons all of his strength, grits his teeth, and starts to climb. He grabs the first rung and begins to pull himself up. One step, one rung, then another, slowly making his way up into the shadowy unknown above. He reaches up with an unsteady hand and pushes the door open. Just as his head crosses the threshold of the opening into the attic, everything goes dark. Franklin suddenly opens his eyes and finds himself sitting back at the kitchen table, his wife across from him, his children playing in the next room while the sound of Saturday morning cartoons blares from the television. He blinks, rubbing at his eyes. Was it his imagination? Did he just have a vivid daydream about climbing up to the attic? He asks Yvette, and she swears that she never saw him get up from the table. He drank his coffee, looked lost in thought for a moment, and then he snapped back to attention. She didn't see him do anything else. She shrugs it off and turns back to the newspaper. Franklin can't shake it off that easily. He goes about the rest of his Saturday as normal, helping tidy up the house, playing in the yard with the kids, and staring off into space. But all the while, he's thinking of the attic. He could swear that he climbed that ladder, and would happily swear it in front of a judge. But it didn't make sense. None of it made sense. He decides to try again, or maybe for the first time. His head aches from the effort of trying to sift through his memories and find what he could be missing. Later that night, after he and his wife settle down for bed, Franklin sneaks out of the bedroom. He tiptoes through the hall until he reaches the ladder up to the attic. Looking at it in the dark, he feels a sense of foreboding, as if his subconscious is warning him to turn back. He fights through the feeling, climbing up the steps one by one. He pushes open the door, climbs up through, and then he opens his eyes, lying on his back in bed, his wife fast asleep beside him. What the hell? Did he fall asleep and dream it? But why would he dream the same dream twice, once at the kitchen table in the bright light of the morning? No, that can't be it. Still, he needs to check one more time, just to be certain. He trudges out into the hall, climbs back up the ladder, and opens the attic door. Once more, he opens his eyes in bed, as if it was all a dream. But he knows better. Somehow the attic won't let him look inside. Whatever's up there, it doesn't want to be seen. He tries to put it out of his mind, to close his eyes and drift off to sleep. But he can't stop imagining the climb up to the attic,
can't stop trying to picture what could be hiding above his head. This is his house, damn it. He should know everything going on in here. It just doesn't make sense. Franklin doesn't sleep at all that night. He just lies there, eyes shut, mind replaying the memory of his failed climbs over and over on a loop. The next day, he tries one more time, only to find himself sitting in his easy chair and watching the television. He tries again throughout the day, every time unable to reach the attic. Yvette notices the change in her husband, but doesn't dare ask what caused it. Whatever it is, he's growing increasingly distressed, angry, and terrified. She can guess what it might be about, and can feel that same uneasy feeling whenever she walks past the attic. The question of it gnaws at her, but she's afraid to try and look for herself. She can see what it's doing to Franklin and imagines what it might do to her. As the week goes on, Franklin and Yvette try their best to ignore the attic, but it grows more difficult with each passing day. By Sunday, Franklin comes home from the office with a box of his things, announcing that he has quit his job. He wants the family to move away from the house and have a fresh start somewhere else. He has a meeting with a realtor tomorrow to discuss selling the house. Yvette starts to protest, but thinks better of it. Best to let Franklin have his way when he gets his mind set on something. Besides, if they can move out of the house, maybe she won't ever have to find out what the trouble with the attic is all about. The next morning, a realtor comes by to meet with the Lees. He has great news. Someone has already put an offer on the house, and it's way more than what they paid for it. For once, things are really starting to look up for the family. They sit on the couch with the realtor, review the contract, and prepare to sign the paperwork. Franklin picks up a pen and gets ready to sign on the dotted line, but the instant the pen touches the paper, he's at the kitchen table again. Yvette sitting across from him with a cup of coffee in her hand. She stares at him, wide-eyed. She didn't forget this time. They both remember being there, ready to sign away their house and start a new chapter of their lives, when all of a sudden, like the skipping of a scratched record, there was a blip of some kind, and they were back here. Franklin rushes to the phone, dialing the realtor's number in an attempt to get a handle on things. It rings once, then an error message plays, informing him that the number he is trying to reach has been disconnected. He looks up the realtor, but finds that the real estate agency he was with is no longer in business. Somehow everything has changed, and their lucky break has vanished into thin air. Franklin throws his coffee cup across the room in a burst of rage, and it shatters against the wall in a flurry of hot coffee and ceramic. The kids stop playing in the other room, coming to check out the source of the loud sound. Yvette shoos them away, then quietly begins to clean up the mess, and they carry on that way until bedtime. Franklin goes to bed early, exhausted from seething all day about the lost opportunity to sell the house. Yvette stays up, reading a book on the couch while the rest of the family sleeps. Just as she goes to turn the next page, she hears something. A voice coming from upstairs. It isn't Franklin, it isn't one of the kids. It's a voice she hasn't heard in a little while. It sounds like Olivia. Yvette can't quite make out what her daughter is saying, but she knows that it's her. She's certain of it, just as certain as she is of the fact that the sound is coming from the attic. She's been avoiding it all this time, afraid to become haunted by whatever has been vexing Franklin, but she can't resist it anymore. She may have run her out of the house, but Olivia is her daughter, and her mother's instincts can only be suppressed for so long. Slowly but surely, she walks to the attic and begins to climb up. Hearing the noise, the children leave their rooms to come and see what's happening. "Mom, what are you doing?" one of them asks, but Yvette does not answer. All she can hear is Olivia in the attic. She still can't quite make out the words, but if she can just get up there, get inside, she knows that everything will become clear. She pushes open the door and climbs up into the inky blackness above. Back below, the children stare at the ladder, listening to the sound of hushed whispers. It goes on for several minutes before Yvette climbs back down into view. "What was up there?" one of the children asks. Yvette turns to look at them, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She shakes her head, silent for a long moment. When she speaks, her voice trembles with a mixture of confusion and horror. "I don't know. It wasn't Olivia." As days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and months turn into years, the Lee family tries everything they can think of to make life with the attic bearable. They try to ignore it, but that doesn't work anymore. They attempt to have the house demolished, torn down so they can build something new on top of the rubble. But after they sign the papers, they wake up in bed and find that the construction company no longer exists. Franklin tries to investigate the attic again,
but it just won't let him inside. If he ever makes it all the way up there, he isn't able to remember it. One day, in a fit of desperation, he takes out an ad in the newspaper asking for help from someone experienced in the unexplainable. He doesn't expect much to come of it, but the ad draws the attention of a secretive organization. A group of men come to the door to speak with the Lee family, identifying themselves as members of an organization they will only refer to as the Foundation. The men from the Foundation attempt to climb into the attic, only to find themselves standing at the front door again. They begin scribbling down notes after this occurrence, whispering to each other and saying words like cognitohazard and reality-altering. The Lees don't understand much of it, but they can tell that it's nothing good. The men from the Foundation block off the house with caution tape, put up a notice of a highly dangerous gas leak, and then ask the Lees to come with them. Over the next few days, Dr. Dorset of the SCP Foundation conducts interviews with Yvette and Franklin regarding the nature of the attic and their experiences with it. He also speaks with the children that still live with them, as well as several of their neighbors. Following these interviews, the Foundation attempts several more manned explorations of the attic, as well as a few unmanned explorations. However, these attempts prove unsuccessful. In the days following these attempts, the Foundation discovers that all records of them have disappeared, and that the investigation attempts appear to have never actually taken place. The research team is desperate to put the puzzle together, and realizes they're still missing one piece: the runaway daughter, Olivia. The Foundation tracks her down, living under a new name and working as a landscaping contractor, and brings her in for questioning. She is surprisingly cooperative, almost unfazed by the bizarre situation. Dr. Garrett is selected to conduct the interview, and he meets Olivia, now Rebecca Feldman, in an interrogation room. He begins the interview saying, "Miss Feldman, what I want to discuss with you is a phenomenon associated with your parents' home, likely located in the upstairs..." She cuts him off. "The attic, I know. I thought somebody would come after me about that. I just didn't think it would be so soon." Dr. Garrett is surprised at her cavalier attitude toward the attic. He asks if she's aware of the phenomenon occurring in the house. She nods and says, "I left my parents when I was a kid, Dr. Garrett. We'd always fought. They weren't happy with the choices I had made, the things I believed in, the people I spent time with. There was anger there. So much anger I thought it might suffocate me. When I left, I felt like I could breathe again. I never went back after that, but sometimes I can still feel it. You know how you feel when you're dreaming and you're trying to run from something, but you can't see it, and you don't know if it's really there, but you run anyway? That's how it feels." He asks her what prompted her to leave her parents. Rebecca looks down at her hands, folded on the table, before she speaks again. "There was one night. We had a fight, and my dad was drinking, and Mom was even worse off at that point, and I kept a knife under my pillow for a long time in case something happened. And they came into my room that night. I don't know what their intentions were, but I drew it and backed them into the wall. The whole thing felt like I was being choked. And that was the first time I heard it. Something moving above me. I dropped the knife and ran, and I didn't look back." Dr. Garrett only had one more question for her: whether she knows about anything in the attic. She looked up from her hands then, meeting Garrett's eyes. "There are always secrets, Doctor. There's only so much hate that can build up in a place before it starts hating you back. I don't know what's in the attic, or if there's anything up there at all. I don't think I want to." With that, she stands up and leaves the room. The Foundation plans to detain her and investigate her story further to try and get to the heart of the truth, but the next day, they can't find her. As more days pass and they are unable to track her down, they come to a disquieting conclusion. According to all available information and legal documentation, Olivia Lee does not exist. Dr. Garrett insists that he spoke with her and continues to review the transcript of their conversation. She remains clear as day in his memories and in the minds of her family, but in reality, or whatever the entity in the attic molded this reality into, she never existed at all. A young researcher is thrown against the wall so hard that his spine breaks. A man turned into a scarecrow. A woman unmoored from gravity. A man losing a vital component of his brain. All these poisoned prizes can be yours if you have your hands on a certain special object. The thief is confused, to say the least, at the sight before him. It isn't exactly what he has been expecting to find on his travel to the Forgotten Cave. The strange object is displayed on an altar, with a beam emanating from somewhere above, shining a bright column of moonlight onto it. This must be the treasure that he was sent here for. But what was this strange treasure? He's still aching all over from his long journey, many days and nights spent crossing the desert just to reach his destination. All around the cavern are precious stones and gold coins, jewelry and riches beyond the thief's wildest dreams, and it's all his for the taking, just as long as he fulfills his promise to the strange, decrepit old man he met at the entrance of the cave. The thief steps closer to the altar and examines the object the old man told him to recover. Upon hearing the word lamp, the thief had been picturing an ornate oil jug with a handle and spout, not this thing. The thief had never seen an object quite like it. It's a tall, thin neck that winds upwards from a flat, circular base. The top looks like the hem of a dress, but far smaller and made from green glass. It's a lamp, all right, but not as this thief would know it. He lifts it up to get a closer look and notices something, an empty space beneath the stained glass lampshade. It looks like there's a part missing. Nearby, he comes across another curiosity, a rounded, almost perfect sphere of glass with an elongated protrusion terminating in a metal connector. It seems like it would be the perfect fit for the vacant port on the lamp. So, figuring out how to affix the two, the thief attaches the light bulb to the lamp. To his surprise, the bulb begins to glow a light blue. Cautiously, he places it back down and backs away, uncertain about what is about to happen next. A sudden plume of blue smoke erupts from the lamp, and the thief ducks for cover, thinking the object has exploded. But there's no loud sound, no flames, and this prompts him to peek out from his hiding place to see a mysterious figure emerging from the cloud. It looks to be an older man, hovering above the ground, not legs, but a tail of the same smoke as the rest of his body. Now the thief recognizes what's going on. He's grown up with stories of creatures almost exactly like this one, and it fills him with a rush of excitement. It's a genie. He can remember as clear as day tales about genies. They are mystical wish-givers, imprisoned within lamps and then bound to the person who discovers them. Once it emerges from its slumber, a genie will then offer whoever freed it 3 wishes.
Hey, you there. You gonna hide all night? Come on, kid, let's get this over with. What'll it be?
The genie asks rather brashly. The thief approaches the smoky, translucent figure and immediately knows exactly what to do. He's already thought of exactly what to ask for, the wish that can free him from his life of stealing and poverty. "Genie, I wish for you to make me rich," he says. As soon as he's finished his sentence, the genie vanishes, leaving the thief confused. Surely he still had another 2 wishes. He's startled as the light bulb he had affixed to the lamp suddenly explodes, for real this time, with a spark and a shower of small glass shards. Before the thief can so much as call for the genie to return and demand that it explain itself, he feels a sickly churning in his stomach. Something is very, very wrong. After a few short moments of violent and painful sickness, the thief lays dead on the floor of the cavern. If one from a more advanced period of history were to examine him, they'd find the thief's body exposed to an extremely large overdose of vitamin C, enough to kill him. The genie had made him rich. It just goes to show the old warning to be careful what you wish for is always applicable, especially when you find yourself making a wish from SCP-4035. Although it might look like an unassuming table lamp from the outside, within it stored an ancient entity who also happens to be wildly unpredictable, and a bit of a jerk, to be completely honest. Anyone examining SCP-4035 will notice the first odd thing about it fairly quickly. The lamp itself is rather unremarkable, composed of a simple iron base with a conical lampshade above. Its pattern-stained glass sports a number of shades of green, and overall, it looks like the type of lamp you might find at a grandparent's house, or a distant elderly relative who always tells you just how much you've grown when you visit every 5 to 10 years, and whose home decor hasn't changed since the mid-1970s. But the first of SCP-4035's many strange properties is that it doesn't actually seem to work. Closer inspection of the lamp itself will reveal that it doesn't actually have any electrical components whatsoever. There's no wiring running through it, no cable leading to a plug that can be affixed to a wall socket, no switch, nothing. Except for a standard light bulb socket. So naturally, anyone coming across this seemingly useless table lamp will feel compelled to find a light bulb and see if the thing actually works. That's when things get even stranger. Light bulbs placed into SCP-4035 will indeed illuminate, despite the lack of electricity powering the lamp. There won't appear to be anything unusual about its functionality at first, other than the bulbs inserted into SCP-4035 will produce a blue-tinted light. But surely that's just because of its ornate stained glass lampshade, right? Wrong. Shortly after placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, that's when he emerges. Who is he? Well, the Foundation knows him as SCP-4035-1, but for the sake of brevity, let's just call him the Genie. Emerging from the Foundation personnel who approached the room have reported a persistent smell of sulfur and ozone coming from inside, as well as the loud sound of a running printer. 317 of the USB socket and power outlets in SCP-2535 are connected to HP brand USB 2.0 compatible devices. Of these devices, 20 have displayed anomalous, potentially ectoentropic functions. But what exactly does that mean? Allow me to elaborate. Just remember, you asked for this. Don't blame me if you aren't able to stomach the details. There are 5 former employees of the Hewlett-Packard Hangzhou branch still located inside of SCP-2535. These employees are in an anomalous sort of status, requiring no sleep, food, or water, in spite of their continued, seemingly endless consciousness. Since the building's discovery in April of 2013, they have not changed in any way, or at least not in any visible way. All attempts to remove these former employees from their, let's call them predicaments, have proven unsuccessful. Allow me to discard any euphemism and explain just what exactly became of these unfortunate workers. First, there is Guo Pingping, the former branch manager. He can be found in the bathroom near the receptionist's desk on the first floor. Guo's head has been forced into the feed tray of a DP DeskJet 1112 printer, which is plugged into the wall. This is troubling for a number of reasons, one of which is that the internal dimensions of this particular DeskJet model's feed tray are not large enough to accommodate a human head, and its components are not strong enough to crush a human skull into a shape that would fit. Nonetheless, Guo's head is firmly lodged into the feed tray. One would assume this would have killed him, but his body continues to move, kicking and thrashing about as if he is in pain. The former assistant branch manager, James Gu Yonggun, is located in the employee pantry on the building's second floor. His body is attached to the wall in a vertical position, held there via 92 20-inch USB 2.0 M-M cables. 5 additional cables have been used to secure the actuating unit of an HP DeskJet 2540 all-in-one printer to Gu's lower jaw. The arm of the actuating unit is also attached to a single HP-10 original ink cartridge in the color black. This ink cartridge is attached into Gu's throat at a continuous rate of 1 stroke per second, and in defiance of the known properties of ordinary ink cartridges, has yet to run out of ink in the years since its discovery. Gu appears to be partially conscious, but is unable to communicate intelligibly when addressed. The former Human Resources Department head, Angel Lee Hui-min, is still in her former office on the second floor, though she no longer performs the duties of her old position. She is still, in a sense, in human resources, or rather, is a human resource. I apologize. Sometimes I have to make a joke to cope with the dark subject matter at hand, but Angel's fate is no laughing matter. Like Gu, she is attached to the wall via a series of USB cables. There is an additional cable, one of unspecified length, inserted into her lower abdomen, which is slightly distended, as though filled with a foreign object. Though a proper analysis has not yet been conducted, the variety of sounds and motions originating from the area seem to indicate that there is a fully operational HP USB single-station thermal receipt printer lodged near her small intestine. As a consequence of this, a never-ending stream of thermal receipt paper is pouring from Angel's mouth at all times, causing her considerable pain and distress. Wang Liang, the former head of the IT department, is permanently placed near the water cooler on the first floor. Like the others, he's bound to the wall by several USB cables, 37 to be exact. There are 12 HP ScanJet 200 scanners pressed against his body, all switched on and running at all times. Next to him, an HP DeskJet 1112 printer is attached to the wall and constantly printing out sheets of something. A closer inspection reveals that it is not paper, but rather sheets of skin. He is conscious, but no successful interview with Wang has been conducted due to his nearly constant, wordless screams of agony. The fifth human subject found in SCP-2535 is Chen Yupeng, who once worked as a trainee technical writer. Now he spends his days in the branch manager's office on the second floor of the building. His body has been wedged into the paper tray and backup paper tray of an HP LaserJet Pro 500 multifunction printer, which has been plugged into the wall via a standard power cable and a 3-feet USB 2.0 M-M cable. His head sticks out of an aperture cut into the side of the printer. The printer itself functions normally, printing copies of the HP Standard Print Quality Diagnostic page and the HP LaserJet 500 Technical Repair Manual, alternating between the two. Since SCP-2535's discovery, it has not run out of either paper or ink. Chen himself is unconscious and shows signs of severe blood loss that, under ordinary circumstances, likely would have resulted in death by now. During a preliminary inspection of the building, one Foundation operative discovered a Canon Pixma E480 printer in the first-floor janitor's closet. This printer was dented and heavily corroded, most likely from the application of liquid bleach, and was also covered with human teeth marks. It has spent the most recent several years attempting to print a 91-page document, but has been unsuccessful due to an apparent jam in its paper tray and feed mechanism. The seams of the printer occasionally ooze human blood, which DNA testing has matched to Yan Xiaoxia, former creative consultant of the Hangzhou branch. SCP-2535 must be sealed away from the public under the guise of health and safety concerns. At least 2 agents are to be stationed in a nearby building at all times for the purposes of observation. Wherever possible, the inside of SCP-2535 must be soundproofed. All material generated by the building's anomalies must be collected and disposed of on a daily basis. So far, these containment measures have been sufficient to keep civilians away from SCP-2535. As far as the friends and family of the missing employees know, their loved ones were never found. It's better that they think of them as lost or dead, rather than learn what truly became of them. As I was poring over the file for SCP-2535, something curious caught my attention. This is not the only anomaly cataloged by the SCP Foundation concerning a branch of the Hewlett-Packard Corporation. I considered leaving well enough alone, but I've never been particularly good at that. When another path presents itself to me, no matter how dark or foreboding it may seem, I cannot resist the urge to see where it will lead. In this case, the path led me to SCP-2211. SCP-2211 was a collection of 4 anomalies discovered in the Shanghai offices of Hewlett-Packard. Notice that I said was rather than is. More on that later. First, allow me to describe the nature of each anomaly. SCP-2211-1 is a 932-megabyte video file titled simply longsmile.wmv. When played, the video depicts a pair of lips on the right edge of the screen. The lips hold a closed-mouth smile for a moment, then open to reveal teeth. At this point in the video, the camera pans to the right, revealing more and more teeth, seemingly forever. Though the length of the video file is listed as 55 seconds, testing revealed that the file will continue to play, revealing endless, maddening rows of teeth for more than 150 straight hours. It will possibly run even longer than that, but testing was through before that could be seen. The video has no audio track. When longsmile.wmv is played for longer than 59 minutes and 20 seconds, the device used to play it will begin to secrete a small amount of human saliva. A sample of saliva was collected for DNA testing, but the results were inconclusive and did not match any known human being on record. SCP-2211-2 is a 2.0 megabyte audio file entitled EYEE-79.WAV. Each playthrough of the audio file is different, but tends to contain bursts of modulated static that go on for 2 to 10 seconds before being cut off for around 0.3 seconds of silence at a time. Like Longsmile, this file can play for a seemingly infinite amount of time, in spite of its listed length of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. When SCP-2211-2 is played for longer than 59 minutes and 20 seconds, the device will begin to secrete a clear fluid, identified as a mixture of water and sodium chloride, amino acids, glutathione, ascorbic acid, and human collagen fibers. Essentially, the device will begin to leak human tears. SCP-2211-3 is a 599 kilobyte file titled r.exe. When this file is run on a computer, it uses up a great deal of memory, causing the device to overheat and its built-in fans to speed up. In spite of the overheating and any damage it might cause, the computer will continue to run until disconnected from its power source. When the file is run for longer than 59 minutes and 20 seconds, air coming through the built-in fans will begin to emit a strong smell of earwax, though no physical traces of earwax have been found. SCP-2211-4 is a USB adapter-powered coffee reheater. When it is plugged into the USB port of a computer, any liquid placed into the container will be heated to approximately 65 degrees Celsius and will also transform into human mucus at a rate of 1 milliliter per minute. This effect is the same whether or not the computer is on. DNA analysis of the mucus revealed that it is a match with the saliva produced by SCP-2211-1. All of this would have been bizarre enough, a series of files and devices that produce human biological material and are seemingly all connected. But something else happened. All instances of SCP-2211 were kept in a pair of containment lockers. However, on June 10, 2014, this containment was breached. I have included a surveillance log transcript that captured the incident. It occurred as follows. Sound of banging metal detected near second floor of Wing B. Door of small item containment locker DAD-2838 is heavily deformed outwards and has experienced a heavy impact from its inside. The sound of banging metal persists for the next 3 minutes as the door of containment locker DAD-2838 begins to burst outwards. Security teams are deployed to cordon off the area and manage the situation. Containment locker DAD-2838 is fully breached from the inside when a segmented humanoid arm emerges, extending to reveal numerous joints along its length. Security teams begin opening fire on the arm to little effect. While the video feed shows that the arm terminates in a 7-fingered hand, personnel present on the scene reported a number of fingers ranging from 5 to approximately 30. The arm repeatedly strikes and breaches the containment locker containing SCP-2211-4, approximately 5 meters from containment locker DAD-2838. It subsequently reaches for SCP-2211-4 and pulls it back into containment locker DAD-2838. No further activity detected. Arm presumed to have dematerialized. Following this incident, the containment locker was examined, but no traces of the many-fingered arm were found inside. Further examination of the locker's contents revealed that SCP-2211-1, 2, and 3 had vanished from their storage media. The files were gone. SCP-2211-4, when tested, no longer displayed any anomalous properties. It was just an ordinary coffee heater, though no staff wanted to use it to heat their coffee, no matter how many times it was washed. Head researcher Min declared SCP-2211 uncontained on August 10, 2014. But there was one more unusual finding. The USB drive that once contained SCP-2211-1 was not empty. There was an untitled text file on the drive. When opened, it simply read, "Got my nose," followed by an unusual text emoticon, : :00, and parentheses. As a man of science, one who has devoted my life to exploring the unexplained and seeking answers to questions that most are afraid to even ask, nothing troubles me quite like a mystery left unsolved. But the tales of these Chinese Hewlett-Packard offices are composed almost entirely of disturbing mysteries, of frayed wires and broken printers, of survivors that cannot tell their stories, and messages we will never get to read. What happened after that Hangzhou branch closed? Was it connected to the findings at the Shanghai branch? Did that mysterious arm grab hold of the Hangzhou team, contorting their bodies into unrecognizable shapes and forcing them to meld with the products they once sold? Or was it once an employee too, broken down into spare parts and trapped as files and desktop beverage warmers? I can't be certain. But I do know this. I'm throwing out my printer. I think I'll just write my notes by hand from now on. I won't necessarily suggest you do the same, but do be careful while handling the machinery. Treat it with respect. After all, you never know if that printer was once as human as you or me.
At first glance, it looks like a perfectly ordinary bathroom. Nothing to suggest that anything weird is going on here. Certainly, if the D-Class personnel assigned to investigate this facility had encountered this room in the wild, if he walked into a bathroom that looked like this while visiting a friend's house or lunching in a restaurant, or even stopping at a gas station rest stop, he wouldn't have any reason to think anything was amiss. But this is the SCP Foundation, so he knows that nothing here is as it seems. He glances briefly up at the camera installed in the ceiling. The lens aperture dilates briefly, focusing on his face, and he knows that an SCP technical on the other end is watching his every move. He grimaces, fully aware that his status as a member of D-Class personnel means that every experiment could be his last. That knowledge doesn't exactly endear him to the Foundation or its mission, but it's not like he has much of a choice in picking his assignments. Suddenly, a voice crackles to life over the intercom. "Please step fully into the bathroom," says the researcher on the other end of the camera feed. "What's this all about?" asks the D-Class personnel. "This is just a bathroom, isn't it? What's so special about this place?" His eyes scan the room. The floor is covered with smooth white tiles. The walls are a soothing light blue color, reminiscent of a calm ocean, the sort of color that you might pick for its soothing effect when you need to make use of these facilities. A large mirror is fixed to the wall, before a countertop with a sink. Next to the sink, there's a toilet, and next to that, a bathtub with a shower. There's a scrubbing brush and a plunger stashed behind the toilet tank, and a fuzzy shag cover stretched over the toilet lid. It's all very ordinary. It's much too ordinary, he thinks. A sudden horrible thought occurs to him. "You're not gonna watch me use the toilet?" he asks, a slight edge of panic in his voice. That's absurd, of course, but here at the SCP Foundation, there's nothing that he would put past these people. They've always got some new weirdness happening, and it wouldn't at all surprise him to learn that they would want to watch him at his most exposed. The voice comes back over the intercom. "What? No, you don't need to use that. Look, just step forward. Literally all that I want you to do is to step into the room." The D-Class smirks to himself. He's already been through more of these crazy experiments than he would care to remember, and he has the scars to prove it. It gives him a small measure of satisfaction to hear the agent getting flustered. Even if he has to participate in these dangerous experiments, he can at least make things awkward for his tormentors. That seems like a little bit of poetic justice to him. As the agent requested, though, he steps forward. The moment that he's cleared the threshold, the door slams behind him with a crash. The D-Class jumps in surprise and shouts, Why'd you do that?" "I didn't do that," says the voice over the intercom. Of course, thinks the D-Class personnel. He should have expected this. He grabs the doorknob and tries to yank the door open, but the door is stuck fast. He yanks again, harder this time, but the result is the same. The door doesn't budge at all. "The door's stuck," cries the D-Class. He feels his heart start to beat faster, and his temperature begins to rise. What terrible thing does this room plan to do to him? But after a moment, he begins to calm down. It doesn't seem like this room is planning to do anything. Maybe it's just a room with a weird door. But if that were the case, then why would the SCP Foundation be interested in this? "Just hang tight," says the agent. "I'll see what I can do about getting that door open." A few moments later, the agent arrives at the door to the bathroom and gives it a sharp yank. It doesn't budge. "Door's stuck," she says. The D-Class rolls his eyes. Of course it's stuck. "Hold on a second, I'll go get a technician," she says. The D-Class personnel listens to the sound of the agent's feet retreating into the distance. He sits down on the closed toilet and buries his face in his hands. What a day. Is he going to be trapped inside this bathroom forever? He can't help but speculate, but he tries not to think about it. He's more annoyed than anything, truth be told. He wonders if the agent is actually going for help, or if she's still just sitting in her cubicle, watching him through the camera and waiting for the other shoe to drop. His eyes flick to the camera, and he furrows his brow. He's so intent on the camera that he doesn't notice as a dark shape slowly bubbles out from the bathtub drain. It's a cockroach, a perfectly ordinary cockroach. Or is it? The roach remains motionless for a moment, perfectly still, except for the subtle twitch of its antenna. Then, all at once, it starts to move. The roach scuttles across the tub, scaling the porcelain walls, and runs across the counter. Like all cockroaches, it seems confused now that it's emerged into the light and eager to find a dark corner where it can hide again. It reaches the edge of the countertop, but, of course, a sheer cliff is no obstacle for an insect. It shimmies down the cabinet and makes a dash across the tiled floor. That's when the moving roach finally catches the eye of the D-Class personnel. He yelps in surprise and pulls his feet up, his knees going flush with his chest. The roach looks oddly out of place in this clean and well-maintained bathroom, and the sight of this disgusting little vermin fills the D-Class with a sudden and deep sense of loathing. "That's one massive cockroach," he mumbles to himself. Almost as if it heard his words, the roach starts to skitter toward him. The D-Class does not like that at all. Without hesitation, he immediately stomps on the roach, bringing his foot down with a definite thud, and then grinding the unfortunate insect under his heel. The sound is loud enough to attract the attention of the agent behind the camera. Apparently, she must have returned to her post after sending a request for a technician. "What was that?" she asks, her voice crackling over the intercom. "There was a really huge cockroach, just came out of the tub. Come on, hurry up and get the door open. I don't like it in here. There might be more of them." Okay, says the agent.
Just hold on for a second. Help will be here in just a couple minutes. Don't be so jumpy, it's just a bug after all, nothing to worry about. The D-Class personnel isn't so sure of that. After all, when you're dealing with unknown anomalies like those in the SCP archives, can you ever just not worry? He pulls his shoe off, stands up from the toilet, and walks over to the sink. Grumbling to himself, he turns the faucet and starts to wash the insect ichor off the bottom of his shoe. He's too intent on his activity to notice that a second cockroach has already popped out of the bathtub drain. Like the first one, it hesitates for a moment, and then it scuttles across the tub, scales the walls, and makes a beeline for its deceased comrade. As this happens, a third roach emerges from the drain, and a fourth. By the time the D-Class turns around, a whole battalion of cockroaches has entered the bathroom. His eyes go wide as he takes in the scene. A good dozen roaches have clustered around the first smashed roach, all feeding on its carcass. It's a grisly scene, and the D-Class is immediately revolted. He knows nothing about roaches, nothing that might suggest to him that this is in any way unusual behavior for these insects, but he doesn't really care. It looks disgusting, and he's positive that it isn't natural. I don't like this, he yells, panic rising in his voice. Get me out of here! Hurry up and open the stupid door! The observing agent, safe in her office, doesn't share the D-Class personnel's terror. From her point of view, she's just watching a man freak out over a couple of perfectly ordinary bugs. Of course, the scene takes on a whole different feel when you're not the one being asked to expose yourself to strange and potentially dangerous SCPs. She can't help but chuckle at the scene. It's not funny, cries the D-Class, once again jumping on the toilet and pulling up his legs into a fetal position. Those things are huge! You better get me out of here now, or... He struggles to think of some threat that might convince the agent to take him seriously, but he fails. The agent is too busy taking notes on the situation. The roaches look to be ordinary specimens of the American cockroach, each about 5 or 6 centimeters long. When the group of roaches has devoured their smashed comrade, that's when things start to get really strange. The small group turns as one toward the D-Class. Now that is weird, thinks the agent. The D-Class probably thinks the same, because he starts to scream incoherently. Both Agent and D-Class are so focused on the roaches that they don't notice something even more sinister happening in the bathtub. A dark, tar-like substance has started to seep out of the drain, gradually filling the bathtub. The agent is too busy trying to soothe the D-Class, trying to convince him to stop screaming and start explaining the scene to her in rational detail so that she can add his observations to her notes. Meanwhile, the oily black tar continues to bubble from the drain, the surface level rising, until the tub is approximately 1/5 full of black goo. The D-Class's eyes suddenly alight on the tub. What's this? He mutters. Suddenly, dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds, of roaches start to rise from the black goo. They boil over the sides of the tub in massive chitinous waves, spreading across the floor of the bathroom in a solid sheet of glimmering black carapaces. It happens so fast that the D-Class can only gibber in mindless terror. There are too many roaches. For the moment, the D-Class seems safe perched on the toilet. The roaches can't scale up the shiny porcelain, slipping back down at every attempt. He scrambles to his feet, standing on top of the toilet lid and praying that it will hold his full weight. Otherwise, he's going to tumble headfirst into that writhing, seething swarm of vermin. He stares at what looks like an ocean of living insects, the light reflecting off their chitinous shells with an evil, oily gleam. It's like a scene out of a cheesy horror movie, but it's all too real. Through his panic, the D-Class vaguely recalls that when he was a kid, he once read a book about ancient life on Earth during the Permian era, when the Earth was a hot, humid jungle, when high temperatures and oxygen-rich air made the world perfect for giant insects. Cockroaches have lived on this Earth for how many million years, he wonders. He knows it's a lot, and he can't help but think about that legacy now that he's confronted with a living carpet made entirely out of roaches. Aren't scientists always predicting that cockroaches will eventually outlive humanity? They're the only nasty little things tenacious enough to survive a nuclear holocaust or the punishments of climate change. He's less worried that cockroaches will outlive humanity right now, though, and more worried that they might outlive him personally. The roaches can't get up the toilet, but they have more success in scaling the walls. Soon the walls are covered in a mass of roaches, the air filling with a constant cacophony of chittering and scratching that sends chills up the spine of the panicking D-Class. The roaches start to march across the ceiling, and the D-Class gets the distinct impression that, if he doesn't do something fast, he's going to be completely covered. In desperation, he throws his shoe across the room with all his might, shouting curses as he does, but it doesn't do any good. His shoe hits the opposite wall and bounces off, dropping into the swarm and quickly sinking beneath the rolling tide of chittering insects. His futile attack only provokes the insect mob, and several dozen roaches take flight, launching themselves at the D-Class. He shouts and claws them away as roaches land on his face and shoulders. They scramble up his neck and tangle themselves in his hair. He keeps shouting and swatting them away, but there are more and more of them every second. More roaches are swarming out from the black oil simmering in the bathtub every second, and now they all seem intent on the D-Class. They crawl inside his mouth as he screams. He gags and coughs, trying to spit them out, but it seems that they're already crawling down his throat. In his panic, he slips and lurches forward, screaming and flailing his arms helplessly. He dives into the writhing mass of roaches. Within seconds, he is covered in a sheet of living insects. The observing agent is speechless, unable to comprehend the sheer insanity of what she is seeing, but watching the D-Class be consumed by cockroaches prompts her to vomit in disgust. The retching, gagging noises can be heard over the intercom, hardly professional behavior, but we're way past worrying about that by now. By now, the bathtub is almost completely filled with black goo. The roaches start to return to the bathtub, scaling the tub walls in vast waves and throwing themselves into the pool of dark tar. As they retreat, they reveal the decimated remains of the D-Class. The corpse is ragged and bloody, partially eaten, its stomach visibly bloated. It twitches slightly, and the observing agent momentarily wonders if it's somehow possible that the D-Class personnel survived his ordeal, even though even a brief glance at the state of the corpse should make it clear it would be impossible. There's just far too much damage. It's obvious, in fact, that the twitching is caused by roaches that have burrowed into the body, squirming beneath its skin. Suddenly, something else begins to rise from the bathtub. It's another corpse, one in a much more advanced state of decomposition, to the point that it's nearly skeletal, but there's still enough flesh clinging to its bones that you might be able to recognize it for the person it used to be. Under the black ooze, there's still a ghost of a face clinging to the skull, liquefying eyeballs still rolling around loosely in its dark sockets, tattered lips hanging off of stained teeth. Its eyes swivel toward the prone body of the D-Class with malevolent intention. Black tar drips from its arms and skull. It places one hand against the rim of the bathtub, the other against the blue wallpapered wall, and slowly hoists itself up and out of the pool of black tar, displacing another few dozen cockroaches with its movements. The corpse slowly stumbles to its feet, dribbling black ichor, and steps out of the bathtub. It staggers across the room with sticky, uncertain steps, leaving a trail of roaches and black goo. When it reaches the body of the D-Class, it grabs it by the leg and then drags it back across the bathroom floor toward the tub. The skeletal corpse pulls the body of the D-Class personnel into the tub, and both of them submerge into the black goo. The remaining cockroaches follow suit, jumping into the black oil and slowly sinking below the surface. At the same time, the level of the black substance begins to fall as it starts to swirl away down the drain. After several minutes, the black goo has completely drained away, leaving no trace that it ever existed. The roaches, the strange living cadaver, and the corpse of the D-Class have all completely vanished, so that by the time the door of the bathroom clicks open again, there's nothing to suggest that there's anything at all strange about this room. Too late, the agent bursts into the room, flinging open the now unlocked door with all her might. She scans the room in confusion, knowing that just moments ago, it was the scene of grisly carnage. There's no evidence of that now, but just the memory, the sight of the D-Class's bloated corpse, the sound of thousands of cockroaches marching and scuttling in unison, is enough to make the bile rise in her throat. She leans forward, hands on her knees, and vomits again. She's seen a lot as an SCP Foundation agent, but this SCP is definitely not one for the faint of heart, or the sick of stomach. What just happened here? Unfortunately, this is far from an unusual occurrence.
It wants. There are no answers. The Foundation has, however, learned the following things about SCP-3010-1. For one, it is totally imperceptible. It can't be observed at all, not in any perceivable wavelength of light. So put down the thermals and night vision goggles or the UV light. The only surefire way to tell, or rather, guess, where it is at any given time is after any kind of reactive incident with the entity. Secondly, the Foundation has noticed that SCP-3010-1 interacts differently with human beings who display the symptoms of avoidant disorders. This can include those suffering from social anxiety or inhibition, or who are typically withdrawn. Around a full half of people with these avoidant disorders will not react to scenarios wherein the entity manifests. In short, the reactive events caused by SCP-3010-1 often don't affect those with avoidant disorders, or at least 50% of those people. However, the half that the entity can interact with
often feels the effects of SCP-3010 with a lot more intensity. The unnerving feeling of being watched becomes full-blown, inescapable paranoia. As for what exactly SCP-3010-1 looks like, the Foundation is at a loss. Given the entity can't be perceived, it makes getting a witness sketch or a mugshot somewhat tricky. However, there is one thing that the SCP Foundation knows for sure. It does have the limitations of a physical form. This isn't an incorporeal, ethereal ghost that can phase through walls and other solid objects. SCP-3010-1 has a physical presence, and it seems to have an awareness of this. It's for that reason it won't manifest in smaller spaces like single-occupant rooms or particular places with no windows or doors like Foundation containment cells. By avoiding these places, it can't be trapped. SCP-3010-1 remains passively hostile toward human beings, and it will only directly engage a subject when a certain number of set triggers are met. Those that inadvertently cause this to happen find themselves receiving a particularly grim fate. Those who actively seek out or attempt to hunt the entity, especially with the intent to destroy it, are more likely to cause SCP-3010-1 to manifest. Sometimes it's worth trying to ignore the ominous sound of creaking coming from deep within your house rather than going looking for what made it. Anyone spending a prolonged period of time around mirrors is also likely to trigger a manifestation. The same can be said for those in unlit or dimly lit rooms, along with those who endure a long period of isolated, continuous silence, or make any attempt to call anyone else for help. With enough of these factors met, enough space, a lack of lighting, and no more or less than one person in a room or house, SCP-3010-1 will manifest and trigger what is known as a reactive event. This can be achieved by doing anything that increases the adrenaline levels of an isolated person, from creepy noises to the instinctive sensation that comes from being directly watched. Those few who have managed to survive their encounters with the entity have described the symptoms of SCP-3010 coming from behind. They will experience the observation or presence of another being coming from directly behind them. Should they find themselves backed against a wall, they will feel compelled to avoid the nearest window or dark corner. Mirrors are also a cause of major aversion for these victims, often causing those experiencing causal absent paranoia to flee to other rooms without any reflective surfaces present. Anyone currently undergoing the effects of SCP-3010 additionally will not be able to just sleep it off either. The symptoms caused by the impending presence of the entity directly inhibit a person's ability to fall asleep, not just out of fear, but due to a fundamental function of SCP-3010-1. The entity can manipulate the areas of the human brain that are responsible for the production of melatonin, the induction of sleep states, and the regulation of dreams. The SCP Foundation has discovered this disruption to sleep is caused by a gaseous substance that is dispersed into the local atmosphere. In order to avoid detection by the public, this phenomenon has also been given a medical classification: causal absent paranoia-induced insomnia. Being unable to sleep or escape the feelings of being watched, the observed victim will inevitably panic. This is what prompts the reactive event. Usually, SCP-3010-1 will manifest through mirrors or windows. Upon manifestation, the entity then proceeds to kill its target. It extracts some vital material from their body, then sucks what is left of them into the breach that it emerged from. When a reactive event has been triggered, SCP-3010-1 deploys a cognitohazardous effect as well. This total memory erasure acts in the way you might expect. Any memories of the targeted person involved in an SCP-3010-1 manifestation will be quickly destroyed. Anyone who might remember them, might think to check on them if they've been missing for a time, will cease to have any recollection of said person. Once the entity has them, it's as if they no longer exist. Of course, this total memory erasure can be circumvented with enough written evidence of a person's existence kept at all times, or with a number of Scranton reality anchors active in the nearby area. Once it has successfully manifested, retrieved a target, and dispatched them, some Foundation researchers believe that SCP-3010-1 enters into a state of stasis. This is known to attract reflective surfaces in the surrounding area, making mirrors or windows appear opaque. Symptoms associated with SCP-3010 are also experienced by any and all human beings within a certain radius of the reactive event. So even if you start to feel like there's someone watching you and look over your shoulder to find no one's there, then you could still be in the clear. Although, that might mean someone nearby wasn't as lucky as you were. Following the manifestation, the immediate vicinity of the completed reactive event will undergo a rapid deconstruction. A spatial anomaly takes place, causing the room or location where the target has recently been taken from to expand into a number of tight, dark corridors and various small rooms that will each be filled with mirrors and other reflective surfaces. To date, the Foundation has only recorded a handful of these reactive events, and thankfully, the spatial anomaly that triggers in their wake will normally dissipate after several hours. However, the paranoid symptoms of SCP-3010 will persist in the local area, which has led some researchers to question the validity of the entity going into stasis. There are those who believe it doesn't take breaks. While avoidant personality disorders can either have an extreme repelling or extreme attracting effect on an SCP-3010-1 entity, those with an excessive compulsion for human interaction, in particular sociopaths, produce a far different and far stranger effect on the entity. Sociopathy is a mental health condition wherein somebody will consistently show that they have a lack of regard for the moral notions of right and wrong. While not all are violent, many sociopaths will often ignore the feelings of others, unless they are attempting to manipulate those feelings. For example, appeasing somebody else to make themselves seem more likable and thus garner validation. Interactions between sociopaths and instances of SCP-3010-1 will often lead to the causation of several severe anomalies. One such sociopath has been incarcerated under the SCP Foundation, serving as a member of D-Class, the disposable subgroup of personnel comprised of violent criminals who often find themselves acting as human test subjects for anomalous experiments. This D-Class, D17729, also known as Mike, is selected for testing involving SCP-3010. The SCP Foundation constructs a specialized dummy house designed to keep the entity trapped. Inside these dummy households, a D-Class is placed, typically one that exhibits extremely reclusive tendencies. They are not told of the existence of SCP-3010-1, nor are they told what the entities are capable of. The D-Class in these houses must each believe that they are well and truly isolated, abandoned alone with the entity. Mike, being one of the D-Class assigned to an SCP-3010-1 containment house, has a video and audio recording device surgically implanted within his body before he awakens inside the dummy house. Confused, he examines his surroundings, searching the area for signs of anyone else living in what he momentarily believes is a real household. He traverses from the bedroom down the hallways towards the staircase, leading from the upper floor down to a foyer. All the while, early symptoms of SCP-3010 begin to surface. Mike checks behind himself as though he's starting to feel like someone is watching him. He tries to convince himself that he's alone. There's nobody behind him. Making a move for the front door, Mike finds he can't open it. He's sealed inside the house. Over the course of the next 3 hours, he navigates his way across the entire containment cell, occasionally musing to himself. More rapidly, he begins to experience the unnerving symptoms of causal absent paranoia, developing an aversion to the darker areas of the house. A few days later, Mike finds himself keeping all the lights on and deliberately avoiding mirrors. He has to practically argue with himself that he's not afraid of the dark, just in order to go downstairs to the storage room for food. On his eventual way down there, he thinks he spots something in the house with him. Fleeing for his life, he locks himself in the storage room for an entire day, preferring to stay where there is food and light. Within a day, his SCP-3010 has become so bad that he's convinced there's something in the containment house with him. He fashions the shelving units from the storeroom into a makeshift barricade. Following his first whole week in containment with an SCP-3010-1 entity, Mike has stayed put in the storage room. He uses additional light fixtures to keep the room bright and begins tearing wiring out of the walls with the use of a makeshift crowbar. Thanks to his previous experience as an electrical engineer, after 9 days, he then creates a makeshift suit covered in light fixtures powered by a portable, hand-crank generator. Donning his light suit, Mike sets out to find and destroy SCP-3010-1, something we know only attracts it more. But after searching the containment cell for 4 hours, Mike falls asleep. This is incredibly rare in the presence of SCP-3010-1 instances, if not impossible. When he reawakens, he not only finds the storage room resupplied by Foundation personnel, but also that the lights have all been put out. Frantically, almost completely unhinged at this point, Mike looks for a weapon to fight any SCP-3010-1 he can find. The next day sees Mike rapidly searching through the containment house for SCP-3010-1 entities. Thinking he's found one, he rushes towards it while exclaiming he has light and for the entity to come out. When he approaches, an SCP-3010-1 reactive event starts, but unlike the other recorded instances, seems to fail. 3 mirrors nearby start to produce a low level of light, causing Mike to investigate. The moment he makes contact with one of the mirrors, he screams. The connection to his recording device is lost, and the containment site undergoes a spatial anomaly. In the interest of recovering any evidence of this different reactive event and finding whatever remains of Mike, the SCP Foundation dispatches a team to investigate the ruined containment site. This unit is comprised primarily of the 8 members belonging to Mobile Task Force 066, also codenamed 8 Blind Men. Led by their captain, the unit is also overseen by a Foundation researcher named Dr. Obrent. As the team enters the ruins of the containment house, they maintain a clear line of communication with Dr. Obrent via radio. With no idea what will happen once the team is inside, everyone is on high alert, told to look out for cognitohazards or any interruptions of their mental faculties. Upon entry, everything goes quiet. For 10 long minutes, there isn't a word from the team. Then comes the eventual report from the captain. The spatial anomaly is in full effect. Dr. Obrent remarks on the long delay of 10 minutes, but the captain insists that, from his and the team's point of view, it was only 30 seconds. They quickly reach the conclusion that the spatial anomaly triggered by an SCP-3010-1 reactive event has, this time, resulted in time dilation. The team navigates their way through a repeating series of hallways, finding themselves in a copy of the foyer of the ruined containment site. It's only then that the captain realizes something is wrong. The team is down a man, MTF-066-8, but his men are confused. They tell him that there are only 7 members of MTF-066. Dr. Obrent concurs. The captain then points out that MTF-066-6 and MTF-066-7 are also both missing. Once again, the rest of the team insists they've never even heard of those people. Their team has always had 5 members. It's as if they can't remember, or their comrades have been erased from existence. 8 blind men were rapidly whittled down from 5 to 3 to just 1. The captain was lost and alone, frantic and paranoid. His remains are never recovered, and before long, the Foundation is forced to accept that their mobile task force, the 3 blind men, have all been killed in action, with no sign of the missing D-Class D-17729. But a series of unauthorized addendums have been left on the SCP-3010 file in the Foundation's archive. They seem to have been left by Mike, who recalls his old D-Class designation number. He describes being lost in a series of endless dark halls with only a few small rooms. He says that they probably hate it here because it's a waste of all their eyes. The entity has eyes. They've got eyes in the back of their head. They've got eyes in the back of their mouth. They don't like us, Foundation, but they watch us. They watch us for so long. Why do they hate us, Foundation? Why do they hate me? Why is it so dark? The addendum from Mike ends with him describing his entity coming out of the mirror. He says there's one for every room. Right behind him. Right behind you. Right behind all of us.
Grinning teeth in the blackness. A man is running down a dark hall, glancing over his shoulder in terror. He carries a clipboard and wears a standard Foundation lab coat. Behind him, in the shadows, a figure floats toward him at a steady pace. He tries to run faster, but can't seem to increase the distance between them. A long, gnarled hand with jagged fingernails stretches toward his shoulder. Fingers curl around to grab him when he wakes up in bed, sitting up and screaming. He catches his breath. It was just a dream. He gets out of bed, splashes water on his face, and puts on his lab coat. He heads out the door for work. Of all the sounds that can be heard on an average day at an SCP Foundation site, screaming is probably one of the most common. When working alongside anomalies that range from bizarre to deadly, shrieks of fear, pain, and shock
are just another part of the job. But as Dr. Simon makes his usual walk to the break room in search of a fresh cup of coffee, the scream that rips through the quiet makes him freeze in place. The coffee cup slips from his grasp, smashing to pieces on the floor, and he barely even notices the mess. He stares at the closed door, listening to the sound. He has never, in all of his years at the Foundation, heard such an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. He waits for whatever will bring the scream to a halt, but such mercy doesn't come. There's no wet gurgle that cuts off the sound, no wailing D-class escorted from the room to be thrown back in his cell, no thud of a body slumping to the ground. Whoever is screaming just keeps screaming again and again until his voice begins to rasp. Dr. Simon can't resist his curiosity, the insatiable need for understanding that led him down the path of scientific research in the first place. He knocks on the door of the room until supervising researcher Dr. Myers answers, brow furrowed in confusion at the interruption. Before his colleague can admonish him, Dr. Simon inquires about the nature of the anomaly in the room. What could possibly cause a man to make that sort of sound without killing him? Dr. Myers shuts the door behind him, takes Dr. Simon aside, and explains that the culprit is nothing but a simple doll. Dr. Simon can't help but laugh at this, shaking his head in disbelief. Does the doll do anything? Does it attack its victims with a knife like Chucky? Does its head spin around in a circle? Does it vomit pea soup? Does it crawl along the ceiling and spit spiders and maggots? No, Dr. Myers shakes his head. The doll simply sits there. It was first recovered from a child's bedroom in an allegedly haunted house and seems to trigger extreme, inexplicable, yet all-consuming terror in anyone who observes it for a prolonged period of time. Otherwise, it does not appear to do any damage. Well, that sounds a hell of a lot more interesting than watching research assistants throw different objects into SCP-914 for the 100th time, or filling out paperwork, or any of the other inane busywork Dr. Simon has been saddled with lately. Still chasing that undeniable curiosity, Dr. Simon makes a request. Will Dr. Myers assign him to examine the doll? Specifically, can he be granted permission to observe it up close and experience its fear-inducing effect for himself? Dr. Myers recognizes the spark in his younger colleague's eye, the fascination with the dark and unknown that led so many of them to work at this very Foundation. How can he say no to that? Besides, the anomaly is largely harmless and isn't going to do any damage that a trip to an in-house counselor and some prescription tranquilizers can't fix. He agrees, and Dr. Simon is transferred to his team the very next day. As Dr. Myers unlocks the door to the doll's containment chamber, Dr. Simon can feel the electric surge of anticipation beneath his skin. He notices his hands are sweating, and he wipes them on his lab coat quickly. Best to maintain a professional appearance, an air of unmoved confidence. Now, he thinks to himself, let's get a look at this infamous nightmare doll. When he enters the room and lays eyes on the thing, he can't stop his face from falling in disappointment. He was expecting something grotesque, a cracked china doll with dark, vacant eye sockets, a soft-sewn doll made from leather of indeterminate origins, but instead, there's just a lumpy clay figure sitting in front of him, loosely constructed into the shape of a nude woman. At least he assumes her to be nude, since the doll has no clothing. The figure isn't detailed enough to be certain. He briefly considers turning around and leaving the room right away, but he was so insistent in asking to be reassigned, he can't just give up so quickly. He'll examine the doll more closely. He asks if he may touch the doll, and Dr. Myers responds in the affirmative. He lifts the doll, feeling its weight in his hands. As he turns it over to examine it, a large piece breaks off. He gasps, horrified at the prospect of damaging an anomalous item on his first day of working with it. But Dr. Myers reassures him that this is completely fine. That curiosity rears its head again, and Dr. Simon breaks off another part, just to see what might happen. He snaps off pieces until all that remains is a rectangular clay piece that vaguely suggests a torso and pelvis. All of a sudden, the remnants of the doll vanish from his hands. He looks up and sees the same clay doll lying on the floor 1 meter away. That's not scary at all. It's fascinating. Dr. Simon is just about to pick up the doll and try breaking it apart once again, when a peal of cruel, crazed laughter sends a chill down his spine. It isn't Dr. Myers laughing. The voice sounds like it belongs to a woman, though it's difficult to tell much from the twisted cackle. He spins around, searching for the source of the laughter, but there's nothing, and no one in the room with him except for the doll. Minutes pass this way, with the laughter ringing in his ears, until all at once, all goes silent. He turns his eyes back to the doll, but it's gone. He's just about to leave the room and inform Dr. Myers when he catches a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye. He turns to see what is there, and immediately wishes that he hadn't. The first thing he sees is her smile, stretched painfully wide, tongue waggling out from between her parted teeth. Then her eyes, rolling wildly in her head, dilated pupils locking onto him with a stomach-churning intensity. Long snarls of black hair drift behind her as she floats toward him, feet off the ground, just barely dragging the tips of her toes along the floor. He would describe the thing as a woman, but she doesn't look quite human. Her proportions are all wrong. Fingers long and sharp, waist cinched in, as if she were wearing a tightly laced corset. Neck so narrow that it shouldn't be able to support the weight of her head. Though her mouth does not move from the cross between a grin and a grimace, she can hear the laughter again, growing louder and louder, bouncing around the inside of his skull. There's that scream, the sound he heard while walking past the locked door only 1 day ago. The sound of a man discovering that, no matter how much technology they invent, or how many cities they construct to convince themselves otherwise, humans are still prey, still animals cowering in a dark corner, while a predator advances toward them. For a moment, he wonders who is screaming, but the raw soreness in his throat tells him that it's his own voice being heard by passers-by in the hall now. The woman drifts closer and closer, moving at a slow and steady pace, as every hair on Dr. Simon's body stands to attention, every primal instinct in his body commanding him to run, to protect himself, however he possibly can. He scrambles backward, afraid to take his eyes off the figure, no matter how horrific the sight of her is. He doesn't want to think about what she might do while his back is turned. He takes one step, then another, until his back hits solid stone. The wall. She quite literally has him cornered, and there is nowhere to run. Like a rabbit face to face with a snake, all Dr. Simon can do is tremble, pale and helpless, as the figure draws near. Her grotesque face stretches toward him, mottled gray flesh, too many teeth, and inhuman eyes only inches away from his own face. Her mouth opens even wider than it was before, wider than he ever could have imagined, and he braces for the worst thing he can think of. But no pain comes. Instead, an ear-splitting scream rips from her throat, a gust of hot, sour air invading his nose and mouth, and the figure vanishes. Dr. Simon forgets all of his professionalism in that moment, sprinting out of the room and not stopping for a moment until he is safely on the other side of the containment chamber door. There, Dr. Myers is waiting for him. Well, Dr. Myers eyes him with interest. Was his curiosity sated? As the adrenaline slowly leaves his body and his heart rate returns to normal, Dr. Simon nods. Now he understands exactly why someone would scream like that in the presence of a simple doll. Dr. Myers places a friendly hand on the younger man's shoulder, reminding him to take a deep breath and let go of the anomalous terror. The worst is over, and the doll, and its accompanying entity, will not bother him anymore as long as he does not observe it for a lengthy period of time again. He congratulates Dr. Simon as well, informing him that he is the 25th person to observe this anomaly, and only the 4th to do so willingly. So Dr. Simon gives himself a pat on the back, thanks Dr. Myers for the opportunity, and returns to his office. A little bit of mind-numbing paperwork is welcome after that much excitement. A couple of hours pass, and Dr. Simon finds himself beginning to droop. Whether it's the resulting crash after such a spike in adrenaline, or simply the malaise that takes hold most weekday afternoons, he knows the cure. Another cup of coffee. His favorite mug broke the day before, but thankfully there are plenty more mugs in the break room. He helps himself to a mug shaped like an owl, and is delighted to find that Dr. Saboya put on a fresh pot of coffee. He pours himself a cup, and strikes up a conversation with the other researchers in the room, recounting the story of his encounter with the doll, taking a moment for a self-effacing laugh at the memory of how unbelievably frightened he was. The others commiserate, sharing stories of their most harrowing encounters on the job that turned out to be perfectly fine. Dr. Saboya is in the middle of an anecdote about her first day on the job, wherein she found herself assigned to SCP-173 and was so terrified to blink that she carried around eye drops to keep her eyes from drying out, when Dr. Simon's eyes suddenly go wide. She asks him what the matter is, but all he does in response is recoil and let out a guttural, almost animalistic scream, dropping his new coffee mug in the process. The other researchers surround him, attempting to check him for any physical ailments. All the while, he stammers and babbles in the incoherent language of the utterly panic-stricken, repeating that she followed him, that she's here, that she's coming right toward him. As they press the point further, Dr. Saboya is able to put the pieces together enough to draw a conclusion. He is claiming to see a manifestation of the same entity he encountered earlier, floating down the hall in pursuit of him. That's impossible, she insists. The entity is incapable of breaking containment. He must still be experiencing residual psychological distress as a result of his encounter. They'll escort him to his office and administer a mild sedative to calm his nerves, and he'll realize that he isn't in any danger. But before the researchers can say another word, they all suddenly collapse to the ground, the floor of the break room littered with their limp, unconscious bodies. After an indeterminate amount of time has passed, Dr. Saboya awakens with a splitting headache, a rush of nausea, and the feeling that she was just dreaming about something awful, but she can't remember what it was. She quickly snaps back to alertness, gently shaking her colleagues awake. One by one, they rouse, with one exception. No matter what they try, no one is able to wake Dr. Simon. He's moved to the medical department for observation, where he remains in a coma for 3 days before he mysteriously passes away. Though his death cannot be directly attributed to his observation of the doll, Dr. Myers has his suspicions. He is especially troubled by the implication that the entity somehow broke containment. He requests reclassification of the entity, SCP-136, to Keter class, but the request is denied, higher-ups citing the possibility of a psychic attack by a different anomaly in the same facility. Years pass, and Dr. Myers puts the incident out of his mind. Then, one day, another round of experimentation with SCP-136 is ordered. A handful of Class Ds are shoved into the room, and Dr. Myers stands outside to supervise and ensure none of them leave before they are authorized to do so. Like clockwork, the sound of their screams follows around 20 minutes later. As the experiment concludes, yielding the usual results, the guards remove the subject from the room with Dr. Myers' help. He is pulling a man toward the door by the elbow when everything goes black. Dr. Myers is woken by the sharp sting of a slap to the face and a worried guard telling him that he collapsed with no apparent cause. As for the 3 Class Ds used in the experiment, they were left comatose and died days later. Memories of Dr. Simon come rushing back, and Dr. Myers reaches out to his supervisors once more. This time, he requests a reclassification and reevaluation once more. His request lands back on his desk, stamped with the same disheartening word: denied. Again and again, the cycle repeats itself. SCP-136 expands its influence beyond its containment, leaving victims comatose and then dead. Those who are knocked out temporarily by its influence experience violent night terrors for months following the incident. Like the wounds of a psychic attack have left scars on their minds. The reach of the entity seems to be expanding, and its power growing. One day, while reluctantly performing yet another test with SCP-136, the D-Class in the room vanishes altogether. No trace of him can be found anywhere in the vicinity. The unprecedented escalation is the straw that breaks the camel's back, and Dr. Myers pens an impassioned plea: reclassify SCP-136 as Keter and allow him to find a way to terminate it for good before it harms or kills any more of his researchers. The O5 Council themselves officially decline his request. When I first learned about the tragic fate of Dr. Simon, an ordinary doll. This brings us to SCP-136-2, the subject of my deepest concerns. SCP-136-2 is an incorporeal nude or partially nude figure, whose gender presentation corresponds to that of the form that the doll takes. Ordinarily, this is female, but the doll does appear in a masculine form approximately 10% of the time. It manifests once the doll has been viewed for a duration of approximately 20 minutes, and the first sign of its appearance is the sound of creepy laughter, followed by a period of eerie silence. The doll disappears, and the figure, ranging in size from 1.9 to 2.1 meters, appears to take its place. Upon appearance, SCP-136-2 is posed in a provocative manner, and will move through the air at a pace of 0.2 meters per second toward the subject or subjects that observe the doll. As it grows closer, the laughter grows louder. By the time the entity is within 1 or 2 meters, the victim will be frozen in fear, will collapse to the ground, or will back up until hitting a wall. When the figure reaches 5 centimeters of the subject, it will scream once, then vanish, before reappearing in its original location. The appearance of this entity has been characterized as deeply disturbing, with an unnaturally wide mouth, bared teeth, enlarged irises, and bloodshot eyes. Exposure to SCP-136-2 has been linked to night terrors for up to 6 months following the initial encounter. Originally, the entity was never seen breaching containment. Obviously, this was not, in fact, the case. In spite of the life-threatening incidents linked to SCP-136, its official containment procedures state that, quote, no extraordinary containment procedures are necessary. It is kept in a standard 10 by 10 by 10 meter concrete containment room, wherein SCP-136-1 is locked in a transparent plastic case. There is no video surveillance of the room when it is not being actively examined. Only Class D personnel are permitted to enter the chamber more than once in a 30-day period. But why is this the case? If SCP-136 is indeed dangerous, posing a threat to Foundation staff and causing significant loss of life, as well as damage to employee morale, why not increase the security of its containment? Why not upgrade its class to Keter? Why not permit the team to attempt to destroy it, neutralizing the internal threat? Well, the rabbit hole of research that I tumbled down during my investigation of SCP-136 led me to the answer. Dr. Myers, a member of the original research team assigned to SCP-136, filed a series of complaints and requests with the O5 Council. As you know by now, these requests were denied, with seemingly no explanation. Well, as is often the case at the SCP Foundation, there was more to the story than there first appeared. Dr. Myers was removed from his position, and a note was added to the official SCP-136. 136 is proving valuable for enhanced interrogation. Memos on the subject, which I cannot disclose how I gained access to, revealed that SCP-136 was eventually removed as a potential research subject entirely in favor of an interrogation tool to be used against members of groups of interest. The records of these interrogations were sealed, but I attempted to uncover more about when these enhanced interrogations ceased, presumably due to the intervention of the Ethics Committee. I hope that I'm mistaken, that some vital information has eluded my grasp, but as far as I can tell, they never did. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-5853, Ticky Taffy Town.